Hotel workers of Reddit, what is the worst thing you found in a room after a guest stay? I had an elderly couple check in one afternoon. A couple hours go by and the husband comes up saying his wife is sick and they need to leave immediately. Given the circumstances, we figured it would be a quick clean, so we refunded the money and downed the room for the night. The next morning, we tell one of our maids to hit it first since we knew it was empty. The maid came back refusing to clean the room because there was crap all over the bathroom. I didn't really believe her because she tended to be lazy, so I decided to check it out myself. She wasn't lying. There was crap everywhere. I don't know how, but there was crap on the toilet seat, on the tank, under the vanity, and on the wall under the vanity, on the floor next to the toilet, on the wall behind the toilet, and on the side of the bathtub. This lady must have blown out her a-hole while falling over to crap how and where she crapped. The smell was horrendous. I ended up having to clean it. I went through 3 bottles of our strongest cleaner plus an entire garbage bag of cleaning rags, which were immediately trashed. We had to down the room another 5 nights with the use of 5 bottles of air freshener and open windows. I'll never forget that. Edit. Now to answer a few questions. I went in wearing rubber gloves and a mask. The motel had one of those small masks for smoke, and I had to use 3 bandanas and leave the room every few minutes. We did not charge the elderly couple for the mess. It was a small motel on the coast, oceanfront, and our bosses were high on keeping a good reputation to keep the repeat customers. Some of you have suggested C. diff or a colostomy bag. I think it could have been either of those. Story 2. A blood-soaked Dora the Explorer doll. There were no kids in the room, as far as we know. It was just one dude in his mid-30s. There were 2 cans of Monster Energy drink beside it and $180 left in tips under the pillow. No idea what was going on. Edit. Yes, the cops were called. It was really weird because at first they seemed pretty satisfied that nothing crazy went down, but then all the cops assigned to the case started to go missing one by one. Then, on the anniversary of their disappearances, a blood-soaked doll was delivered to the police station. 8 dolls in total, and the creepiest thing about it was that 3 of the cops had children. Those children's names were stitched into 3 of the dolls. Okay, that part about the missing cops was made up, but really though, I didn't really deal with the cops directly. I gave my statement about how we found the room. They sent me home and that was the only time I talked to them. It was a summer job, so I went back to school about a month and a half later, but when I left, our understanding was that everything was okay. If anything came to light after I left, I was not made aware of it. But I feel like since I never had to talk to the cops again, they were satisfied that nothing super crazy went down. Also, geez, you guys sure are confident that doll was in an ass. Story 3. A bear. First, you gotta understand that a lot needs to happen for this to occur. Our lowest floor was about 1.5 meters from the ground, and each outside room had a balcony rail. However, a guest had decided to want to unload his motorcycle from his truck and leave the ramp down, so I'm assuming he could ride the bike up when he was done. The guest that was staying in the room had room service, decided to leave the food uncovered and the balcony doors open, and later went to the hotel pool/spa to relax. Upon returning, they had gone to us at reception and said that there was a bear in the room. Puzzled, we quietly approached the room and slowly opened the door. Lo and behold, there was a bear eating room service and making a mess of my afternoon. We called Parks Canada to deal with it. Guest was not charged a cleaning fee. TLDR, a bear used a car as a ramp to get into a room at the property. Story 4. One of my favorite hotel stories. Not a room, but the pool. It's late evening and a woman comes angrily into our lobby from the pool with 3 children and says, "You guys need to do something about what's going on out there," and gestures to the pool area. I look at her inquisitively and she just says, "Go look, you'll see." I walk outside and it's pretty immediately clear the couple in the hot tub are discreetly having sex. I approach just enough to get their attention and say, "Hi guys, I know everyone's here to have a good time tonight, but we got a complaint about some hot and heavy activity in the hot tub." They're clearly intoxicated, but apologize and say it will stop. A few minutes later, the phone rings. It's the woman who complained before calling from her room which faces the pool. "They're still at it. You need to do something. Children are staying in this hotel." I go back outside and sure enough, now that the spectators are gone, they're effing it out in the hot tub. I go back out and tell them to get out. They start giving me the story. It's their anniversary. They're very sorry. We won't have any more problems with them, etc., etc. I foolishly let them stay in the hot tub. 10 minutes later, phone rings. Seriously? Same lady. I look out the window. They're both totally naked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I've warned them. I'm calling the police." Police arrive and head out to the pool. The officer handles it like a pro. He's very nice, lets them know that it's inappropriate and he doesn't want to ruin what's clearly a fun weekend for them both, but they need to go to their room and not come out for the rest of the night. They're to stay in their room until tomorrow morning. No excuses. The couple thanks him for his understanding and promises they'll behave and stay in their room. The officer and I wind up chatting and laughing about it all, and he asks if he can grab a cup of coffee in our lobby while he fills out his report. Of course he can. He's sitting in the lobby, I'm back to work, and I hear him say, "Oh, you've got to be effing kidding me." I'm shocked at the broken quietness as I see him jump up and exit the lobby, right to the hot tub, where the same couple is back in the hot tub making out. I can only assume they took the stairs at the end of the hall out to the parking lot and around to the pool. Arrested them both. They came back Monday afternoon. They were wasted on Friday night to collect their property. Story 5. There was an older woman who checked in my second week of being there. She definitely should not have been independent. She lived in town and booked a room for a week. She said that she was getting her house renovated because it was infested with fiberglass. She was probably in her 70s or was just not upkeeping herself for a person in her 60s. She would walk around with one of those surgical masks and wearing yellow rubber gloves. As the week went on, she started to wear bandages on her arms. We think she was scratching herself. I bet if we asked, it would have been because of the fiberglass. She shouldn't have been able to drive, but she kept going to and from her house to get more things. Basically was moving in. Our hotel was on a main road and she would just back up into it without looking. It was a miracle she never got into an accident. But other than that, she would spend most of her time in the room and occasionally would walk to the office, where the manager would sit. This would be me or one of my other coworkers, and just spout crazy stories about fiberglass and how it was everywhere and all over her room. Once the week was up, she extended her stay another 5 days because her house wasn't ready yet. She repeatedly declined maid service, so we could never really get a glance of the condition of the room. Yet she would keep complaining that her air conditioning had fiberglass all over it, and one of the days she came to the door complaining that the room was infested with spiders, and she showed a tissue that she said had spiders in it, but there was nothing. Like real sad stuff. Unfortunately, since we didn't have any real way of helping her, my boss advised me to tell her that we're booked solid for the rest of the summer, etc., so she couldn't extend her stay any longer. So we waited out those last few days, dealing with her complaining and occasionally catching glances at the room as the maids brought her towels and such. From what we saw, there were pillows everywhere, a big bag of perfumes, pills, etc. sprawled out on the dresser, like so many random things, etc. She was seen a few times carrying large garbage bags into the room. We weren't sure what was in them. Just imagine a room that a mentally ill person had been staying in. She also had a few weird interactions with guests that made them complain, so we really could not wait until she was gone. But this is the freakiest part where we get to the answer to what we found after a guest stay. It was spotless. On her last night, we think she climbed out the window, first floor, and put stuff in her car and left. Stealing the key too, but that's common enough. We just replaced them. We went back and looked on camera, and she was not on camera at all. The night manager did not see her leave. If you leave the regular way, you have to have been seen by the manager. The office is in the front, and it's a small hotel. Only way she could have done it is through the window. Every worker at the hotel was so curious to see what the room was like after she was gone. It was insane. Clean, nothing broken except the air conditioner air filter. She said it had fiberglass all in it, but other than that, not much else. We still had a third party clean the room, but it was frickin' weird, man. My boss said she drove by the address and it was a beautiful house. Must have been a couple mil minimum, and there was like a metal trailer in the driveway. We think she started living in that after the hotel. Sad and just so bizarre. I really hope she got some help or something. There really wasn't much I specifically could do, so we had to just move on. Story 6. I've posted this before, but here's my story. I used to work at a hotel as a housekeeper. The rule was when you finished all your rooms, you had to go to the other housekeepers because they like to go slow to get more hours, and we can't just allow that. Anyways, so I wander up to the second floor down at the far end, room 226, a double queen. The room hadn't been stripped yet. The bedding and trash is still in there, and I thought that was odd because normally we have all the rooms stripped by noon and it was 3 p.m. Well, I open the door and this overwhelming stench of crap just slams into my face. Not even like normal crap smell either. Like someone had been devouring hot sauce covered shrimp at an all-you-can-eat buffet for 3 days. I pull my shirt collar up over my nose. It can't be that bad. They probably just didn't flush, right? I press on into the bathroom, eyes beginning to water. my throat having dry, involuntary seizures. I forced my poor eyes open. Nothing. The effing bathroom is spotless. Oh God, where is it? The panic sets in. I must go further into the darkness. I must cross the hotel room and open the window. As light illuminates the room, I can finally see what the crap demon has done. Do you remember the scene from Dogma where the crap demon comes out of the toilet? I think he left there and checked right on into my hotel. Crap was smeared all over the white duvets and sheets on both beds. This dude had literally crapped himself, smeared it in the bed, switched beds, and crapped in that one too. He left a trail of sickly brown matter across the carpet, decorated with tiny surprise crap nuggets just for me. I noped. I told front desk that I absolutely refused to clean that room, and if they wanted to write me up/fire me, I would be fine with that. Story 7. I've worked night audit at a couple hotels for a few years now, and I've got a couple of stories of nastiness left behind in rooms. The first story happened about a week after I started working night audit. This guy, who was staying on our first floor, had decided to go outside to smoke and only a towel. His towel apparently became stuck in the door, and in a genius move, he grabbed the smoker's pole and busted out the window to his room. When he climbed in, he got cut badly enough that he bled all over the room. The shower curtain, bedding, and a couple of pillowcases had to be sent out to be professionally cleaned, and the rest of the room had to be professionally cleaned. The hotel charged him with the cost of the window, the cost of the cleanings, and for every night the room was out of order, which was about a month. During cleanup, one of our housemen got cut by the glass in the window and had to get treated in case of bloodborne disease and get stitches. The guest paid for all that too. The cost was around $10,000 or something, and he was banned from the property forever. He tried to come in again about a year later with a third-party reservation, and our GM personally waited for him and escorted him off of the property. The second story is about a man who we called Huge James. Huge James is literally the fattest man I've ever seen. He's pretty tall and easily at 400 to 500 pounds. In his room are his wife, his daughters, and himself. The women in the family were all normal size. This family quickly developed a bad reputation with our pizza chains that delivered because they would order a lot of pizza and never tip the driver. The drivers would come down and complain to me or other front desk staff about this. It got to the point where the Domino's drivers would just give us the pizzas to take up to their room. Huge James and his family never let housekeeping in for about a week, and when they finally were allowed in, there was so much trash from fast food and pizza that they had begun to stuff it under the beds. What's worse is that Huge James was physically too big to use the toilet in the room. We have rooms with reinforced toilets, so we absolutely could have accommodated him. So he had defecated in the tub. He then would use our nice white hotel towels to wipe himself and just leave it on the floor. Nobody knew about the towels until our laundry lead, Miss Brenda, the sweetest and nicest little woman I know, found them herself. We had to throw the towels away, and we nearly lost Miss Brenda that day as well. While that was going on in the laundry room, one of our housekeepers was cleaning the room and noticed a towel tucked into the side of one of the beds. She pulled the towel out and a giant dildo came flying out with the towel. I saw the pictures of it, and end to end, it was almost as wide as the towel it was covered with. In addition to this, there were stains all over the mattress that had soaked through the sheets and onto the mattress. In the bathroom, the tub wasn't draining, and when they pulled the stopper mechanism out to try and clear the blockage, a lot of poop came with it, and that's how we knew they were shoving the poop down the shower drain. During this time, they had been staying on a third-party reservation and making a new reservation every few days. When the new reservation popped up in our system after discovering what they had done to the room, the GM decided to evict them. Huge James came down and started screaming at the front desk supervisor about how the mess wasn't his fault and that it was retarded daughter doing all that and making the messes and defecating in the tub. Those were his exact words, and how he talked about his daughter, if that helps you understand what kind of a person he really was. Everyone had met his wife and daughters, and they were really nice people, so we didn't believe him when he made claims that his daughter was the one making the messes. Huge James drove a lifted Hummer with huge chromed-out rims, and the night before his eviction, I jotted down his license plate number in case he tried to pull something before he left. And he did. When he found out that he was no longer allowed on the property, he trashed his room and smeared all the sauce packets from fast food and actual food on the walls, the TV, and the windows. They found food between the mattresses, and the bed frames had been broken. When it was time for him to go, we had police there to escort him off the property. After they left, all the damage was found in the room, and because I had the license plate number, they were found and charged with vandalism, I think, and we took them to court for the damage to the room. It came out in court that it was actually him that was defecating in the tub, and he destroyed the room before they left. Story 8. This is more weird than bad, but I forgot that a guest decided to extend his stay, and so when a maid went to clean his room, he called me up saying she wasn't able to get into the room. I went up and unlocked it for her. Upon opening the door, we peered into the room and she immediately yelled and hollered about how she wasn't going to step inside that room, and quickly just left the scene. The guest, a sweet and somewhat nerdy 20-something computer programmer, had what I can only describe as an immense amount of voodoo items in his room, including this strange statue of a raven and a large tome, candles, and other fetishist items. Felt bad for invading his privacy when I realized he had asked to extend his stay. His door always had the do not disturb sign on it, and I just assumed he forgot to remove it before leaving, as many guests do. Story 9. Not my proudest moment, but I clogged up a sink and toilet once. I was going on vacation and was going to have a 13-hour layover in Frankfurt. I figured this will be fun. I'll find luggage storage and explore the city. Maybe catch a museum, walk through beautiful fall leaves, and get lunch and some apple wine. But I got sick on my first flight. I had tried to take sleeping pills, but just couldn't fall asleep. I've taken these pills every day for a decade, but never on a plane before. I knew if you couldn't fall asleep within the first 20 minutes it takes to activate, if you forced yourself or were forced to stay awake, it would actually have the opposite effect. So I'm sitting on the plane, wide effing awake, with my heart racing. When I get off, I think I need to find a day rate hotel near the airport, take a nap, before I figure out the next steps. I started to become feverish. I managed to get shuttled to a day rate hotel in the middle of nowhere near the airport. I was the only person there. I check in and ask where I could get lunch after a nap. I was informed that there was nothing nearby, and the restaurant was closing in 5 minutes and wouldn't open until I should likely need to check out. So, even though I feel sick, I order something, which I thought was a hamburger, but was actually something from Hamburg. I also got some apple wine since it was looking like I wasn't going to be going out exploring now. It was disgusting. I don't know why I tried to eat it. Defeated and sick, I went to my room. Instantly, the room started to spin. I feel so hot, I strip off all my clothes. And then I realize I have a major problem. I feel the urge to have explosive diarrhea and explosive projectile vomit. The trash can was mesh, so my only option was to sit on the crapper and vomit into the small, low sink right next to the toilet. When I thought this was over, I took a shower and laid down. Then the room would spin again, and it would start all over. For hours. For hours this cycle continued. How long had I been here? Had I missed my flight? Is it the next day yet? If I hadn't missed my flight, what time do I need to leave to make it? Will they even let me on the plane in the state I'm in? Finally, hours later, the room isn't spinning again. I survey the damage. A slightly damp bed from me laying on the duvet after my showers. Toilet clogged. Sink, F the sink. I try to unclog the toilet, but with no tools, or poop knife, it's futile. But I try to save the sink. With no cups or tools in the room, I cup my vomit in my hands and scoop it out to try and put some in the toilet, but there's too much. I try to make some go down the shower, but I quickly realize this is a worse plan. After another hour of trying to make things right, I simply take another shower and put clothes on. I had around 300 euros on me that I expected to use to buy souvenirs for family from this Frankfurt day trip. I left the entire thing on the desk with a note of, "I'm so sorry." I then check out and say, "I'm sorry, I was sick in the room," to the bewildered two staff in the hotel. I then asked for the shuttle to take me to the airport. I see a poor woman start to head to my room right as I board the shuttle. I did manage to feel 100% better by the time I went through security, but I'm still very ashamed of what the poor cleaning people probably found and smelled from that room. Story 10. I worked as a housekeeper for about a month back in April 2010. This was fairly early in my shift, and I was on my way to pull linens, swipe in, shut the door behind me, and start to go about my routine. First order of business, do a once-over of the bathroom. I should have known something was up because the light was off and I couldn't see clearly into the bathroom. This room was on the side of the hotel that the sun hit hardest, and every other room was flooded with light, so either I just needed glasses, I'm not paying attention, or both. So I walk forward, keeping my eyes on the floor for some reason, swing my arm around to hit the light, start to walk forward onto the tile as I'm tilting my head back up, and almost straight into a pair of men's briefs, hanging from the ceiling at about face level. I scare easy, and surprise Fruit of the Looms was no exception. I yelped, but stumbled backward into a wall as my eyes adjusted to the laundered nightmare I just found myself in. I dust myself off, walk into the bathroom to find this guest had a laundry line running along the shower, and the ceiling in the door had been starting to wash clothes in the sink, grabbed the linens and got the hell out. God is my witness, those briefs I almost face-planted had skid marks. Story 11. Dad owns a hotel in Santa Monica. I work at the front desk. We had a guest initially check in with a bunch of extra equipment. The hotel does have a no professional filming rule in place, so we kept a close eye on the guest after we checked him in. That night, the same guest had a bunch of people in his room. When security went upstairs to kick people out, only 4 people were allowed in his room type, they shoved our security guards and we called the cops and kicked them out. They didn't retrieve any of their belongings yet. The next morning, housekeeping and a few managers went into the room to see if there were any damages. When they walked in, there was a huge red carpet layout across the room, leading to a wall that had red curtains that weren't part of the room, hanging along the entire wall with a huge logo that says The Bachelor behind the curtains. There were also posted all along the walls that had the Bachelor logo and had the guest himself shirtless with a bunch of women around him. We Googled the guy after and didn't find anything, but in Google Images, he had a bunch of badly photoshopped pictures of him with celebrities, probably like 10 of these pictures overall. When he came back to retrieve his stuff, we charged him $500 for cleaning costs, and he started cussing everybody out, so we called the cops and got him to sign. He got his crap and left. Story 12. Something I can unfortunately contribute to. I used to be a housekeeping manager at the most magical place on earth, and we used to host the global cheer competition, UCA. There were 2 tiers of competition, collegiate then high school. The collegiate cheer teams were purely athletes, up at 7 in the morning to stretch and practice for like 10 hours. Crazy dedication. The high school cheer teams are high school cheer teams. They were some of the least considerate guests we had, and would leave horrendous messes all over the rooms. Think, multiple bags of chips blown all over our carpet and linens, melted gummy bears on the furniture. A mess. I had a housekeeper tell me that a room had a horrible smell, but she couldn't find it. I walk in, and she's absolutely right. It smells like rotten beef. I look and can't find anything. We then realize it's coming from the mattresses. We pull the linens off and find nothing. Then she suggests we pick up the mattress. Underneath was a mostly empty bag of peppered beef jerky, filled to the brim with used, bloody pads. They were swollen like diapers and had stained our mattress. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever inhaled. Hotels are hell. People are gross. Story 13. I worked in reservations for a pretty nice resort. Rooms were about $300 to $1K a night. I had a mom call and say her and her teenage son wanted to visit. They lived in the area. I think she kept asking about how we clean the rooms, etc., and something seemed off. So I told my manager and put some comments in the reservation. After they checked out, the housekeeps found the entire room covered in crap. Floors, walls, you name it. Another time, we had a man who had some sort of medical event happen after he had checked into his room. We had just opened up that part of the building after a huge renovation. He ended up throwing up blood all over the room. He died in the room, and there was so much damage. They had to completely gut the room and even replace the carpet. There was one Valentine's Day where a couple had checked into one of our more expensive rooms for the evening. We couldn't find anything in the room, but these 2 women got into a knockdown, drag-out fight that led down the hallway with blood smeared all along the hallway walls. I remember one time a woman left her vibrator in the room and called the front desk in a panic, asking them to retrieve it and mail it to her. And ghosts. Sometimes there were ghosts in the rooms. Story 14. Not a worker, but I checked into the Atlantis, Bahamas, probably 8 years back, and after being sent to the wrong room twice, if you've ever been there, you'll know that walking from the reception to a room can take a wankload of time. So yeah, that was an hour I'm never getting back. Swiped my key, swung open the door, only to be met with a wall of cigar smoke. I walked 2 meters into the little hallway thingy before the room proper, and my effing skeleton leapt out of my mouth when I heard this baritone scream from the toilet to my left. There, on the kludgy, with his kegs at his ankles, was this Wesley Snipes black linebacker-looking mother effer, with a massive Cuban sticking between his sausage fingers and the pink pages spread out on the floor in front of him. As I ran from the room, with my a-hole the size of a pinhead, he was yelling all this awesome, "Who the F you, white boy? Get the F out of my room, female dog!" I ran about 100 meters down the main corridor, laughing my balls inside out. I'm from Scotland. We've got like 11 black people there. It was a thrill to be on the receiving end of a racial slur for the first time in my life. P.S. Atlantis is a crap hole and a ripoff. $8 for a Twix in the shop? Go suck a chicken, even if you've got fun water slides. Story 15. We had a group of probably 50 to 60 wealthy professional people who would come once a year and rent an entire floor for a massive swingers orgy. They'd open up all the connecting doors and just drink, and smoke for an entire night. It was a nightmare for housekeeping, but they paid ahead of time to have the entire floor sanitized and aired out after they left, and the guests were all really nice. I had to go up to their floor at around 9 a.m. the morning after, and the entire floor just had a layer of hot sex grime on it. Someone had apparently busted a Randy Marsh-esque load on the carpet near the guest elevator. There were condom wrappers all over, and everything looked like it had been touched with sticky, lubed-up hands. It smelled like if two people who had just run a marathon decided to skip showering and go F in a sauna while they chain-smoked cigarettes and weed. The bellman who was with me is an older guy from LA who was a gang member and drug dealer in the 80s. And I'll always remember him stepping out of the elevator, looking around, sniffing the air a few times, and saying matter-of-factly, "I've been in crack houses in better condition than this." I did get a kick out of the fact that the entire huge party rented a meeting room and paid for a catered breakfast buffet, and they did leave very sizable tips for the housekeepers. Story 16. Flip side, I stayed in a hotel, and probably left them with quite the room. Long story ahead. It was my best friend's wedding. I was the best man, and staying in this hotel with my newish girlfriend. The venue was 3 hours away, so we stayed there for 3 nights. For the entire duration of our stay, we had an alarm clock in the room that would not stop going off, all hours of the day and night. Noticed it as soon as we checked in. It was going off as we got in the room. Figured a previous guest set it and forgot. However, it went off again as we were heading back out for the night. Wrote it off again. Well, we got 0 sleep the first night, leading up to the rehearsal day. It was random intervals, but no more than every 15 minutes. I unplugged it, took the batteries out, tried to move it, except it's built into the nightstand. Still going off. I called an irritated front desk to do something, and they couldn't help until the morning. I just had to keep shutting off/snoozing the endless alarm. My girlfriend ended up staying across the hall with some friends, while I got the worst night's sleep through a muted nightstand alarm that was pushed into the bathroom. Yay, romantic night number 1. Day 2, I was irate. I was probably more harsh than I should have been with this manager at first, but I was sleep deprived and he was unbelievably apathetic and irritated that I would even bother him with this. They promised to remove the nightstand and replace it while we left for the day. Well, came back that evening to shower and change for the rehearsal and dinner, and there was the same stand still going off. I knew because the same dent was in the top where I rammed it into the bathroom door frame. Oh boy, was I mad. I should include for this part in the ending, I'm 6'4", 280 pounds. I played sports through college and a year of some bad AAA pro. I'm usually a teddy bear, but I'm nothing if not intimidating the first time we meet. Not with this poor desk girl. I lost my mind and apologized in the same sentence. It wasn't her fault, but I was ready to kill that piece of crap manager. I let her know that and asked the nightstand to be removed entirely, not replaced. We left for dinner, pissed and tired. My mood and lack of sleep showed. I was quiet and stumbled through a pretty good speech that came out dull and off-tone with my delivery. The night was ruined. Anyway, we call it early and head back. Return to our room, and it was still there. WTF. I was too tired to be mad. I just picked it up, took it out of our room, walked it down the hallway from the wedding's block of rooms, and left it at the elevators for the staff to handle. They had the audacity to call our room and bring the unit back, and knock on our door in the early hours of the morning to tell us we can't remove furniture and leave it throughout the hotel. Now, they only knew it was our specific room because I had been complaining about it for 2 days. Took no course to fix it, and actually threatened to kick us out for causing a noise disturbance in the hallway. The disturbance was their broken alarm clock that was seemingly possessed and running on pure hate at this point. Whatever, another night of bathroom alarm clock. At least this time I smothered the speaker with towels. Day 3, wedding day. I actually did sleep and woke up okay, but I had to be up early. The guys started the day fishing on a chartered boat. Yeah, should mention this was a very nice wedding, a crazy venue, and staying in very expensive hotel to boot. We went back to the hotel and had beers around this alarm clock that had become legend at this point, taking turns getting our hair cut and shaved by the 2 barbers we hired, get dressed and head out, with one quick stop at the desk. At this point, they knew me, and most of the staff sympathized with my struggle. I was very calm and composed and asked for the final time for the alarm to be removed, and I made it known that if it wasn't, that I'm very sorry, but I would have to remove it myself. They urged me not to do anything harsh and let me know the hotel was quick to charge a $500 fee for even small damage or cleaning fees. Wedding went okay. The lack of sleep definitely put a damper on things, but I made the most of the night and really connected with this girl that I had promised an amazing weekend to. After party finished, it was time to call it a night and head back for a little sexy time, and the effing thing is still there. For 3 days, I complained about this alarm clock going off non-stop. They refused to even apologize, never mind remove it, even after I threatened to destroy it. So a pillow went over it, we did our thing, and afterwards we celebrated by having her swing the heavy base of the standing lamp into this alarm clock a dozen times until it was pieces on its mount. Once the alarm was broken, we settled in for a great night's sleep. Finally. Well, about 20 minutes later, the low buzz of a dying fire alarm started to become audible, until it went into a full scream of the loudest alarm clock you've ever heard. Unreal! I went full beast mode. I ripped that entire night table apart by hand, bit by bit, smashing this thing to about 100 pieces, about half of which ended up through the drywall. It looked like a bear broke into this room and ripped every wall open looking for food. As the rage settles, and I'm slowing down, the light flips on. I turn to see my girl still in bed. Flip around to see the most horrified night hotel manager I've ever seen. The one I said I was ready to kill. Keep in mind, I'm completely naked, and again, a very large, hairy, and muscular man. My coworkers now regularly refer to me as the Mountain, all big Game of Thrones fans. We both stood there silent for a second. A deer in headlights and a confused gorilla in a stare down. The moment breaks, and before he can get a word out, I took a handful of the broken plastic in my now cut open, bloody-knuckled hand, walked up to him, and super calmly said, "Hey, fix that alarm clock for you," and handed him the pieces. Let him know we'd be leaving after we got at least one of the night's sleep we paid for, and he could charge me whatever he thought was reasonable to fix the room. I was not charged an additional fee. Story 17. I got an after-hours call down to the front desk from an angry guest, demanding that I call the police. I went up to his room and found used syringes laying on top of the Kleenex box inside the tissue dispenser in the bathroom. I offered to dispose of the paraphernalia in our hazard waste bucket downstairs and get him another room. He refused to let me dispose of it, demanding that police come and investigate, acting as if he was going to get pinned with this if police didn't clear him. He seemed to think this was an extraordinary event that hotels never have to deal with. I called the police. They arrived on scene, spent all of 5 minutes in the hotel, and they left with the paraphernalia. People would, of course, leave all kinds of items behind. Clothing, mostly. One trucker left a flashlight/stun gun. He was a recurring guest, so he was able to retrieve it from us. And I remember someone left a large dildo in one of the rooms. Once a flight crew got drunk in the TV area downstairs. After a pilot blew chunks in the water fountain, the co-pilot and flight attendant helped him stagger to his room. They left behind a ton of pizza and miniature booze bottles on the ottoman. Score. I guess none of the previous stuff would qualify as worst, just odd. I guess the worst thing left behind that I ever had to deal with would be human crap. We had some wheelchair-bound guy fall down and lose control of his bowels. There was crap everywhere, all over the bed and floor. The fire department and paramedics came, and the poor guy was taken to the hospital. I had to clean up the mess. It wasn't fun. Story 18. Blood. Blood everywhere. Blood on the sheets, on the pillow covers, on the floor, and even on the freaking curtains. Blood on the bathroom walls, on the toilet seat, on the towels, everywhere. Here's the short story. The hotel I used to work at received many religious groups of married couples to heat up their relationship. So basically, the group spent some time doing romantic things around the hotel and the city. During one of those groups, they had a little party with alcohol on the night before they left. Late night, a couple from this party came to the front desk saying they lost their keys to their room. Strangely, they asked for the keys of an empty room, but since the late-night receptionist was a very effete man, he thought someone from an earlier shift had screwed up something, like given the couple the keys to the wrong room. Keys were given, they came back to their room, and in the morning after, the entire group had left the hotel. As per usual, the morning crew saw a little note on last night's log. Couple lost keys to the room number XX. Given backup keys. Charge sent to their account until the keys are found, or something like that. The morning crew immediately realized that that was supposed to be empty, and they went in there to check if everything was all right. And so the bloodbath was seen. Now, the best part is that was not murder blood, since no one was accounted missing, and the CCTV footage from the other night recorded that a couple who was married, but not to each other, was identified. It was menstrual blood. To conclude, we had to tell the group organization of the event and charge the respective fees. I don't remember if that particular group returned to our hotel again. Story 19. Instances like this is one of the reasons I got out of the business. I was working for a chain of budget hotels that advertised being the cheapest in town. It wasn't long until the junkies of the city got wind of it and started booking rooms. There was only one guy in particular who was pretty much in the final throes of addiction. Track marks everywhere, no teeth, open sores, etc. He had been barred from the hotel, but my coworkers were a bunch of idiots, and most of them addicted to something as well. So, of course, on the day I'm off, someone checks him in. Now, this was a small hotel with bare-bones staff. We had 3 shifts, morning, afternoon/evening, and night. The person who had morning shift had the job of cleaning the rooms before we opened check-in. On that day, I had the afternoon shift, and a day after, the morning shift. When I get in and start the changeover, my colleague tells me that in room 16 it smelled so bad he didn't clean it. I see that we're hardly booked and decide fine, I'll clean it tomorrow. The next day when I start my shift, I see that we're fully booked, meaning that room had to be cleaned. I went in there expecting it to be a bit smoky and the sheets a bit dirty. No problem, on with the mask, cleaning gloves, and avanti. I opened the door and almost puked instantly. The bed and floor were covered in a mixture of cigarette ash, crap, and blood. There were about 30 syringes strewn about on the bed and the floor. I immediately got better gloves that would protect me from needle sticks. Fortunately, was already wearing thick boots, and the detergent we were supposed to dilute and went inch by inch picking up syringes and putting them in a container, then disinfecting the F out of the surface inch by inch. Needless to say, the bedding went straight in the trash, and at the end of the day, the room still smelled so bad that I had to book one of the guests in the nicer hotel across the road. I worked in hotels for about another 5 years after that, and saw a lot of gross things, but that will always be the worst for me. Not to mention, I was being paid less than $50K a year for it. Never again. Story 20. I have 2. The first happened at 2 a.m. while I was working the front desk. We watched throughout the night as a woman, probably in her 50s, slowly seduced and got drunk with a guy, 20s, and eventually convinced him to bring her back to his room. She didn't actually have a room at the hotel. Hours after they had gone up to the room, we get a call and it's the woman asking, how much would it cost to rent a steam cleaner? Because there's a mess. We start questioning her and eventually convince her the only way we can help her is if we come to her room. We go up and she answers the door wrapped in a towel. The guy is hiding in the bathroom. The woman looks embarrassed and says that she got her period, so there's some blood on the bed. My coworker and I say, oh, no big deal, it happens, and that we'll change the sheets. When we get up to the bed, it becomes very obvious that there's not a small blood spot as described. There's crap streaked everywhere over the bed. Coworker and I exchange a look and begin changing the sheets as carefully as possible. Everything starts to come together and we realize she must have let him put it in her butt and things went south from there. As we're leaving the room, the guy comes out of the bathroom and says, oh, here, take these too, and dumps a pile of crap-covered towels into our arms. Basically, a couple had butt love-making and she crapped all over the bed and towels. The second one is a lot shorter. Someone vomited in the water tank of the Keurig machine. Took us a week to figure out where the smell in that room was coming from. That was the only time I saw the housekeeping manager unable to deal. Story 21. A room literally full of crap. I had a longer-term guest stay at the hotel I worked at the time. He stayed long enough to be considered a resident, so he couldn't be kicked out without going through the courts and serving an eviction notice. When he first arrived, he claimed he was a doctor and worked odd hours. Every now and then, we would get calls about his room from other guests next door or below him. The calls were to say he was stomping around his room in the middle of the night. We would call his room and he would apologize and say he was working late and it wouldn't happen again. And it didn't for a couple more weeks. Every so often, some random women would come to the lobby and drop off medication for him. The doctor would decline to have them drop it off in his room, and he would ask us to hold it in the lobby for him, except he never came for it and it started piling up. Fast forward to about 4 months into his stay, when another regular, let's call him Mr. B, happens to get the room beside the doctor. Mr. B comes by to tell me the doctor is acting strange. Apparently, the doctor would come out of his room in his underwear and ask Mr. B if he wanted to be his friend and if he could hug him. Mr. B told me he was going to punch the doctor if he came close to him. At the same time, the doctor's credit card declined, so I call him up, but he's not answering. I proceeded to file paperwork in the courts to have him evicted. It has been about a week now of the doctor's credit card being declined. I call the room every day and get no answer from him. I check with housekeeping to see if they've seen him while servicing his room, and they say they haven't seen him, but he's always in the bedroom portion of his suite and declines that room to be serviced. At this point, I assume he's going to bail on us without paying his bill, so I take one of the guest services supervisors, let's call him Tom, with me while I go and deliver a letter letting him know he has 3 days to pay or he will be evicted. As soon as I get to the door, I knock and there's no answer. I let myself in, and as the door swings open, a most disturbing smell hits us, and Tom immediately runs back out and starts puking. I call out the doctor's name, and there's no answer. I try to let myself into the bedroom, but couldn't get it open. I assume he's blocking the door intentionally, so I slide the eviction letter underneath and run back out. The whole night I'm thinking, what if that awful smell was his decomposing body? So the next morning I take a housekeeping supervisor, let's call her Marcia, with me to check the bedroom. As soon as I open the door, Marcia also runs back out and starts puking. I make my way to the bedroom and force the door open. I noticed the letter I slipped under had been opened and was tossed to the side. I look all around and see piles of crap on the mattress. Piles of crap on top of towels, which had been thrown all around the room. Seems like this guy had shat everywhere but the toilet. The piles of crap had been growing mold on the baseboards and wallpaper of the room, and the room was infested with flies and gnats. I run out and start gagging. I had to hire an external company to come and sanitize the room, as well as replace the carpet, baseboards, and wallpaper. Story 22. I was hotel manager for a while. Self-unaliving in a hotel is more common than people think. They don't want their family members to find them, so we do. But honestly, worse than a dead body is just bodily fluids in general. One time I had a family staying in a room that was too small for them. I typically would have made them purchase another room, but it was a middle-aged couple and their young kids traveling with their very old grandma and grandpa. They insisted grandma and grandpa needed them there 24/7, and the kids were sleeping on air mattresses. I let it slide. I almost never do, but I did this time. I regretted it. They were with us for a week. Our policy was that after 3 days, housekeeping must have access to your room. That's our rule. You're told before you book. I ran a family-style lodge, and a lot of the decor was unique and expensive, and plus, if it's a family that large had been without fresh towels/linens for 3 days, we wanted to get in there. Also, nobody had seen this particular family since they checked in, so they had been in the room the whole time. Somehow, they managed to keep my housekeeping staff out until day 6. When I realized nobody had been in there, I placed a courtesy call to the room saying that we had to get in there for towels and sheets as per our policy. I got a frantic, "Okay, we just need a few minutes." I already knew it was going to be bad, but holy crap. Literally, there was poop on everything. The beds, the floors, the walls, every single towel, the dressers. It was truly unbelievable. It smelled so bad, my housekeeper refused to go in. Apparently, both Grandma and Grandpa had colostomy bags that the family would change with very little care. We had to hire a professional cleaning, painting, and carpet company. All of the furniture was tossed. Truly terrible. We were also unknowingly providing a room for a woman who had killed her mother. The cops arrested her at our location. What struck me about that was how friendly she was. When we cleared out her room to give her belongings to the cops, all we found were lottery tickets and an excessive amount of anti-diarrhea medicine. No clothes, nothing else. She got life in prison. Story 23. Worked for a hotel in Clovis, New Mexico in college. Working late shift. I had 2 elderly ladies come in with their grandchildren. They all looked pale white. I greeted them and was told they were traveling right outside town and hit a large animal with their van. They were really frightened and had no idea if damage had been done to the car. I agreed to go and check out the van while they got settled in. When I got outside, it looked like a murder had taken place. The white van was covered in blood, and the smell of cow dung hung in the air mixed with other smells from the carnage I will not describe. I simply could not imagine these 2 older ladies and 3 young girl grandchildren walking up to this the next day. I asked for their keys during the overnight and told them I would take care of the car. I then spent 2 hours with a bucket and a bunch of rags. Yes, I threw them out, cleaning all the horrific mess off the van. Grossest thing I've ever done in my life. Next morning, they tipped me $20, thanked me, and went on about their trip. Won't forget that one. They obviously hit a calf as they drove through dairy country. Luckily, the van was not damaged other than cosmetics. Only other one that compares to this was a regular guest who swore they threw out a massive check. I got to go dumpster diving for an hour and found it. Story 24. I had a summer job on the Cape and it's after Labor Day. Season is ending, job will be ending on Columbus Day, but I had graduated that year. I had no job lined up, so I agreed to stay until the holiday. The only problem was that I had no place to stay. Roommate left and I couldn't afford the room on my own. My boss knew someone who had a motel where I could go. The deal was that I would get a cheap rate if I cleaned rooms. No big deal, as there weren't that many customers during the week. Anyway, this weird guy checks in and he's there maybe 3 to 5 days. doesn't leave the room, and refuses cleaning, so okay, I'm good with that. So I get off work and go back to the motel, and I am walking to the area where the supplies are kept to start my rounds, and I see this cop crouching next to this car, and he waves me over. Then I see a bunch of other cops. They have the manager knock on the weird guy's door, and as soon as the guy opens the door, they rush the room, scuffle with the guy, and bring him out in handcuffs. Turns out he escaped from a mental institution. Okay, weird, but no one got hurt, and I thought it was over until I looked into the room. There were cigarette butts all over the place, in the ashtrays, on the floor, in the bathroom, in the toilet, in the sink. He must have been smoking one right after the other since he checked in. Since there were burn marks on the carpet, furniture, and fixtures, the manager told me to just clean up the loose butts to make sure nothing was smoldering, but that was all since the room would have to be gutted. The guy still had 2 or 3 cartons of cheap cigarettes left. Story 25. We had smoking and non-smoking rooms. The smoking rooms, for whatever reason, were notoriously always worse on average than the non-ones, and were way more likely to be trashed. I walked into my first smoking room of the day to find that you couldn't see to the back of the wall due to how thick the remnant smoke was. Sadly, the air was even turned on. There were the usual, for smoking rooms, beer bottles and cans all over the place. Half of them still had a significant amount left in them. Cigarette ashes and butts were in and on everything. One was even perched precariously on top of the middle of the lampshade where the metal ring is. That had to be skill to do that. These things were pretty normal. When I saw what else was in there, my stomach turned a bit. Sex toys and the boxes they came in littering the entire room. It was obvious the insertable toys were all used, thoroughly. There were batteries and their boxes lining the nightstands. Some cutesy bondage things were piled on the bed, and a strap on it was even torn. There were things in there I couldn't even begin to guess what their purpose was. There was enough of this equipment to fill an entire large trash bag. It took half an hour, the amount of time you're given to clean a full room, just to pick up all the trash and things. That's when I found the most surprising and unfortunate thing. When I got to actually cleaning the room, I was scraping off some ashes from the ottoman, and a surprise pain ran through my finger. I looked at my hand to find a needle sticking out of it. In panic, I ripped it out and must have tossed it away the moment I saw blood coming out, and I went to go clean it. Luckily, I had to do months of blood work to make sure I wasn't exposed to anything, and I was deemed all clean. Story 26. One lady called the front desk, freaking out, saying the toilet is broken and water is leaking everywhere. So I rush to her room, open the door, and I'm greeted by 12 plus dildos scattered everywhere in the room and a tripod set up. Water is flowing on the floor, so I go to the bathroom where she's crying in the bathtub, and the toilet is legit broken in half, like someone got a sledgehammer and office spaced it. I asked what the hell happened. She says she just sat on it and it broke, but she wasn't overweight to where that would be anywhere close to being possible. My person hypothesizes she got a little too rough with her toys. There was an old homeless guy who got a room, then proceeded to crap and piss in the beds. Yeah, beds. He got a room with 2 beds and crapped in both. The next day, he comes in to check into another room. I straight up told him, hey, don't crap and pee on the room beds. He acted oblivious at first, but then later confessed and said he was sorry and he drank too much. So dumbass me decided to give him a room. Next day, he wrote F you in his own crap on the walls. Story 27. Well, I've worked in the hospitality industry for the bulk of my career. I've worked in luxury hotels, highway motels, and have now transitioned into remote workforce accommodation, aka camps. Basically, these are medium to large 2-star hotels which exist for the sole purpose of housing oil and gas workers. O&G folks are an interesting bunch as it is, but lock them up in what's essentially a cross between a minimum security prison and a hotel, and the madness will ensue. I've found quite a few things over the years, but here are the highlights. 1. A foot-long, hard plastic dildo with metal prong in the base. Why the prong, you ask? So he could hook it up to the car battery in his room. Yes, the dildo was wired to a freaking car battery. That one was a shocking find. As a bonus, he had one suction to the shower wall, which had a hefty coating of crap on the tip. 2. Just this week, a guest decided to use his shower like a urinal and not rinse it out afterwards. Tack on the fact that he had the heat cranked to full and the whole place smelled like a porta potty in July. To make matters worse, this wasn't a checkout. He was still staying in the piss sauna and had no issues with the aroma. 3. This one's a bit darker, but I was first response on a live stream self-aliving at one of my properties. I had to shut off the stream while his wife was screaming on the other end. Alcohol and depression is not a good combination, especially in the oil sands. Thankfully, it wasn't messy, but it was exhausting. 45 minutes of CPR is no fun for anyone. The guest didn't leave anything behind in the room, but I sure left a part of myself. I've got a bunch more stories, most of them involving bodily fluids and other funny stuff. Story 28. I managed a little 972 square foot apartment vacation rental, along with others, in Austin. Sometimes people would stay the weekend, other times for a month or two. We had a woman stay with us for 3 months once. She had 2 dogs that we'd met, and saw that they had crates. At first, she seemed great. Then the weird stuff started. She asked us if she could use the washing machine of the larger house that the apartment sat behind. I told her sure, so long as she cleaned up after herself. The following week, we lost $2,400 because she trashed it and was sitting in the backyard with friends when those guests arrived. So I told her it was no longer available. Then she asked if she could let her dogs use the yard once in a while, if she cleaned up after herself. After my second time cleaning up after her dogs, that was off limits too. Then she tried not paying rent that 3rd month, so I staked out front until she came out, collected payment, and told her we were going to need it for new guests the following month. The way she stood in front of the door made me wary. On her last day, I showed up to find that she had left early, and when I walked in, I walked right back out, maxed out her credit card, and it still only covered less than half of the damage. It was a non-smoking apartment that smelled like an ashtray in a toilet. The couches were chewed up and pissed on. The carpet was caked in dried dog piss and crap. The bed sheets were torn, along with the shower curtains. They'd literally used the house itself as an ashtray. There were tissue balls with dog poop that had been tossed out the back window and were sitting on the slanted roof below. There was dried poop on the bathroom floor, and mind you, she paid good money for this place. After 3 months, it looked like it had been an abandoned crack house for years. My fault for trying to respect her privacy, I guess. The worst thing about it was that smell. A smell where you just can't imagine a person has any dignity to live like that. Story 29. I have a good one and a bad one. Here goes. I worked at an extended stay, a hotel that the rooms were basically a studio apartment. We had a gentleman that lived there too that had been living there for 10 years. He was a Vietnam veteran who, in his own words, became a heavy drug addict after the war for 40 years. He had gotten clean and lived there because he was super involved at the local VA, helping other recovering addicts. Super nice and interesting guy to talk to about the war and life. One day, his daughter calls asking me to check on him because she hasn't heard from him in a while, and tells me if he doesn't answer the door to go into the room to see what's up. So I go up. He doesn't answer the door, so I go in. He's standing there naked with dried blood down his chest and in between his legs, mumbling incoherently. The bathroom is right beside the door, and the toilet is covered in blood and black feces. I called 911 and they came and got him. I was terrified he wasn't going to make it, and I had to call the daughter to tell her the situation. A week later, he comes up to the front desk to let us know everything's all right, so it worked out in the end. That's the good one. The bad was somebody at the same hotel had a heroin binge for 3 days, and when the maids entered the room, it was covered in vomit, diarrhea, and various other bodily fluids. The dude's drugs, needle, and spoon were still sitting on the table. We had to call hazmat to basically gut the whole room, then the hotel had to rebuild and restock everything because nothing had been spared from the geyser of fluids this guy must have been. I honestly don't know how he could have left the room with as much of the stuff he left in there. Moral of the stories, you work at a hotel long enough, you're gonna see somebody's fluids on something, and probably not the sexy kind. Story 30. A couple stayed overnight, and the next morning after they checked out, housekeeping discovered their room was just covered in feces and urine, soaked through the sheets and absolutely ruined the very expensive mattress. It was on chairs, the floor, the wall, and plugging up the shower drain. The only thing we could think of was that they were into some Scat stuff and didn't want to ruin their own bedroom, so decided to do it at our hotel. We charged them the standard $200 damage fee along with the entire price of the mattress. It went through on their credit card and we never heard from them again. Not in a room, but in the hallway. A drunk guy lost his key and didn't feel like getting a new one, so just took a dump in a trash can. We had it on camera too. We've had multiple people leave their gun or ammo behind. How do you just forget that? Once it was a cop, and he was so embarrassed when he went to pick it up. My favorite was after a bachelorette party. Male part-shaped confetti everywhere, in the hallways, elevator, and lobby too. I was finding little chickens months later. Story 31. This will probably get buried, but the worst thing I ever found was crap. Literal crap everywhere. The LDS church had paid for a mother and her disabled daughter to stay at our motel for a while because something had happened to their house. They stayed for about 2 to 3 weeks, I believe, and they refused service the whole time they were there. The day they checked out, I had the honor of having this room on my chart for the day. I was already dreading it, as anyone in the industry knows that rooms that refuse service are usually pretty messy by the time the guest checks out. The moment I opened the door, the smell female dog slapped me so hard, my eyes watered. Upon entering the room, I saw crap everywhere. It was ground into the carpet, smeared on the walls, thrown/splattered onto the ceiling, rolled up in the blankets. Thinking I had hopefully seen the worst of it, I walked to the back of the unit to check the bathroom. It was in the sink, drawn into patterns on the mirror, and all over in the tub. But to my surprise, the toilet was absolutely pristine. At that point, I sat down and took a deep breath and started laughing like a maniac. I didn't want to deal with this crap. F this crap, but I needed the job. My boss ended up sending another coworker to come help me clean the room. The motel ended up fighting with the church about paying extra for the condition of the room, but I ended up leaving for a better job shortly after this incident. Story 32. Okay, so not technically a motel, but kind of close enough. I got to live in a government-subsidized housing area, and it was basically real small 1 or 2 bedroom houses lined up in rows. They're all the same house with minor changes, basically. During my off days, I'd help the manager with stuff for a little off my rent or some pocket money. Usually, help would be minor stuff like cleaning or some minor handiwork. The difficult stuff was left to the professionals, but it was usually cutting the grass around all the complexes since it was expensive to get a landscaping company out there. So I'm sitting in my living room watching The Amazing World of Gumball, and the manager calls my phone. She tells me the tenant a few houses down from me up and left one night without warning and hasn't shown up for about a week, and his apartment was starting to smell. She wanted me to grab the master key and check it out to make sure nothing shady was going down. So I go up to his apartment, and the moment the smell hit me, I knew something was dead in there. So I run back to my little apartment and grab some vapor rub, my cell, and a pair of clothes I don't care about because that smell just clings to stuff. So I get back to the apartment, and his neighbor sees me and comes out. We talk, and I explain to her what's going on, and she tells me she heard him and some woman arguing the night he left, so I put 2 and 2 together and tell her to get the sheriff down here ASAP. I unlock the door, and there are flies everywhere, and sitting on the couch is some dead woman with needles everywhere. Turns out he was a dealer and this woman was a client. From what I guess, she OD'd on the couch waiting for him to get back from whatever he was doing. I learned later from my manager that the reason he never got back was because he got pulled over for speeding, and since he had warrants out for him, he was arrested. I think he was going to the local Walmart to get condoms or something. Story 33. This was about 4 years ago or so, when I worked for a locally owned hotel at the front desk. We frequently had high school sports teams and college teams stay with us, because the hotel was sports themed and located in a college town. This one junior high team came to stay with us for about 4 days during the summer. They booked all the adjoining rooms and suites. It was a boys team, baseball I think. Housekeeping would put unclean rooms on maintenance frequently when they were understaffed, and we just had a full house. So a lot of this team's rooms were put on maintenance without tickets when they left. It wasn't a big deal. We had a few more weeks before we would be full again, so there was time. And usually team rooms would need a little more deep cleaning than a usual guest. But this time, there was this one suite that still haunts me. So a little under a week after they left, the coach calls the front desk and I pick up the phone. He says his player left something in the room, and I tell him I'll look in our lost and found. I see that HK hasn't cleaned it yet and it's still on maintenance, which is kind of weird because it's been almost a week, and the other rooms the team stayed in are clean by this point. But I decide to go to the room myself to look because there's nothing in the lost and found and no one's been in there. Plus, I got a $25 prepaid Visa from a guest one time for going back into the room and finding her hairdryer or something as a thank you once. So I open the door and the smell just hits me. Teenage BO, rotten cum smell, old food, it's all there. The room is trashed. The bed is broken, the pull-out couch is broken, there's rotten food everywhere and trash everywhere. The trash is overflowing in both sections of the suite. The bedding and pillows are strewn all over the room. There are chairs on the ground, laying on their sides, and it looks like the dresser/TV stand are covered in this dried white liquid. Just covered, not like a little bit or an accident, like some kid purposely jizzed on the drawers and tried to draw a pattern, or multiple kids, because there was a lot, and on more than one piece of furniture. Now, I'm not saying it was cum, but if it walks like a duck and all that, anyways, HK had just let it rot for almost a week because no one wanted to clean it. I took pictures of the probably cum-stained dresser, I'll see if I can find them later, the broken furniture, and the general mess to send to my manager so we can charge the team for it. I can't find whatever thing I'm supposed to be looking for, and I'm gagging so hard at this point that I have to leave the room. So I go back to the desk, and in the most polite voice I can muster, say whatever the thing isn't in our lost and found, and I'd be happy to take down his name and number if we find it. There's no way I'm telling him he's paying for the room, or what I found, or that HK hasn't cleaned it yet. He's mad at me, but I stand my ground and get off the phone. We had to put the suite on maintenance for about a month and a half to fix everything, and clean and sanitize the room. I think one of the parents or the coach calls back later asking about the charges on the card, but I sent him to our manager's phone immediately and washed my hands of it. I try not to think about how 4 14 to 16-year-old boys made that kind of mess. The smell still haunts me. Story 34. I was a front desk worker for a hotel near a pretty large music venue and a few larger businesses. So we were used to having business guests complain about other, louder concert guests. One morning I'm getting ready for work and my coworker calls me and asks me to come to the hotel ASAP and that he'll explain more when I arrive. As I pull into the parking lot, I notice that it's surprisingly empty. We're the closest and nicest hotel to the venue, so we sell out practically every concert night. I knew right away this was trouble. My night auditor tells me that sometime overnight, a group of drunken guests came in, presumably returning from the concert, and started harassing him. Nothing out of the ordinary to do something about it, but noteworthy. Anyways, it's almost 3 a.m. and the fire alarm starts going off, starting from the top, 4th floor, all the way down to the 1st. Fire department came and had to evacuate the entire building. The FD found the source of the alarms and opened the door. Inside was a naked drunken man passed out in the shower, and his body was blocking the drain, with the water on full blast on the hottest setting too. This had not only flooded the room, but had flooded 3 others, including 2 with guests in them. Electrical damage and structure damage galore. The guest left without a trace. So when we went to go check his information, it turns out he's not a concert guest, but a business guest, whose company so graciously paid for his stay. I'm not sure how much we finally ended up charging him, but I put $3,000, dictated by my general manager, onto his company's card before passing on to my sales team. Story 35. Here's a fun story. My fiancé and I had to stay at a hotel while our new house was fumigated. We noticed during the night that our pillow top mattress is upside down and not as comfy. I go to strip the bed to flip it. Bad idea. There's a basketball-sized stain of brown right in the center of the bed. Oh, now we have to flip it. Finance is already tearing up. Once flipped, we see the true horror of what happened there. There's a blood stain about 3 feet squared on the top side. There's knife gouges all in the bed, and while some have blood in them, others don't. At this point, my fiancé is in tears, but I'm laughing harder than I ever have in my life because of the sheer coincidence of it. Here's what seems to have happened. At least 2 dudes got a sex worker to come there. Her makeup and more blood was on the pillow under the pillowcase, and she fought as they tried to stab her. They missed a few times, and it's in about the middle of the bed where the stab marks have blood, so she continued to fight. It appears one guy held her and slit her throat in the middle of the bed. There is enough blood to completely soak through the bed and make a huge basketball-sized mark on the other side. The human body only holds about a gallon or so of blood, so this woman definitely died there. We called the police and they didn't believe me when I said we discovered a murder scene. They sent a rookie cop over and the look on his face was he thought we were bullcrapping him. He found out we weren't. He told us it definitely was blood and that they had never had a report from there about a murder at all. So here comes my favorite part of the whole ordeal. I went to get my money back for staying there, as you would expect, and when I explain what has happened, the Middle Eastern lady looks at me dead in the eye and says, "What, am I supposed to get a new bed when one gets a little stain on it?" I'll never forget that. I might have pics somewhere, but it's been a while. It happened in Opelika, AI. Story 36. I'm not a hotel worker, but I had an absolutely disgusting experience the last time I stayed in a hotel. It was a family trip to Disney World, and we were flying early morning from Rochester, New York to Orlando, so we booked a hotel, Quality Inn if I recall correctly, near the airport. Got in around midnight after a 3-hour drive. Had to be up at 4 a.m., so I basically just took my pants off and got under the covers. Didn't even turn the lights on. Woke up the next morning, flicked on the lights, and discovered that the sheets were covered in effing bloodstains. I just spent the night with nothing but boxer briefs separating my junk from some stranger's bodily fluids. I was grossed out, but it was time to go, so I quickly got dressed and headed out. About 2 hours later, as we were waiting to board, I noticed a burning/stinging sensation on my thigh when my clothes rubbed against the area. I didn't think much of it until I went to the bathroom and noticed little blisters starting to form. It turned into a very large, very painful staph infection over the next 48 hours that lasted throughout our 2-week stay at the Disney World Resort. 3 years later, I still have a scar from it. Story 37. I worked in a bar that had 3 apartments which were rented out for Airbnb and such, so not really a hotel, but we still had to check people in and at times clean the apartments. All good. One weekend, we had rented out all 3 apartments to a group of 15 Russian blokes. Nice at first, but a bit hard to communicate with because of the language barriers. Luckily, I speak a little Russian, just a little, which made me their friend. After they checked out, I went up to check on the apartments, take out the laundry and such. Didn't expect too much, but when I opened the door, I was amazed with what I saw. Nothing, literally nothing, was in the place it was supposed to be in. Empty beer, wine, and booze bottles everywhere. Cigarette butts, cigars, dirty clothes, food packaging, broken glasses and plates, TV smashed in and couch cut open with the stuffing all over the place. There was not one single effing item in the apartment that was not dirty, broken, or out of place, with most of them being all 3 at the same time. I walked through the apartment and found a whole variety of hard drugs there. I'm not kidding when I say that with the street value of the drugs, we could easily cover the damage, but this was just one apartment. After checking on the other 2 apartments and consulting the owner, I decided to call the cops to come deal with the drugs. It was so effing much. I saw cocaine, ecstasy, meth, a lot of weed and heroin just laying on the table of the first apartment. There is a lot more on the other 2. Now, I don't really care much for drugs, and working in the bar scene, I'm no stranger to cocaine. It's widely used, but I never have myself. If it was just a bag of cocaine, I would not have bothered calling the cops, thrown it out and do my thing. But the sheer volume? God damn! When the cops arrived, they were a bit sketchy as to why I called them. People trashed the apartment. Okay, but you know who, right? Yes, officer, I do, and I did not call you for that, but please come have a look upstairs. After explaining that no, there was not a dead body, as far as I had seen, and it was drug-related, they were still a bit skeptical. But when I showed them what I had found in apartment number 1, just laying on the table, they called in a drug unit and were, just as I was, amazed by the volume and variety of drugs found. Story 38. I worked at a couples-only resort in the Poconos in the 90s. We had standard motel-type rooms, cabins, and then these 3-level sex-den-type things with a round bed, heart-shaped tub, and cage swing chair. When you walked in, you could see up to the 3rd level, where the bed was from a series of mirrors. And once I walked in while people were having sex, and yes, I knocked and announced myself repeatedly. I once saw towels drenched in so much blood that I was surprised I had seen both guests checking out that morning. You aren't supposed to move guests' things around, but they left multiple dildos in the bed, which makes it difficult to change sheets. So I set them standing upright on the TV. Someone left one of the cabins with vomit in the sink, champagne-soaked towels in the sauna, and the worst part to clean up, behind the bed and one wall was all mirrors, which were covered in body oil prints. Like, above the headboard were a bunch of ass prints. Then, against the wall were full body oil prints, hands, boobs, legs. You could practically see the whole outline. That took forever to clean. Still, the worst part of the job was probably trying to make the round beds. I'm 5'1", and they had a solid shelf-style backboard around the back third or so of the bed, which I would have to balance myself up on and lean out to reach that area. Picture like Superman, but in a blue smock. I don't miss this job at all. Story 40. Years ago, I worked in one of the largest Las Vegas hotels, and I was the only front desk staff member that wanted to investigate suspicious rooms. So security always asked me to go up with a master key and unlock the room for their investigation. I saw 4 deaths in 3 years, which is about the average for a Las Vegas Strip hotel. One Friday, we had a full weekend and a single room hadn't yet checked out by late checkout, and so up we went. Opened the door and found almost a literal grocery store of treats and sweets in this guy's room. Maybe 20 uneaten full cakes, hundreds of candy bars, pies, cookies, and bags of fast food on every flat surface in the room. Over 4 50-gallon garbage cans in total. I remember a big bakery cake with the price tag still attached falling onto a security guard's head from the top shelf of the closet when they tried to get everything cleaned up. A man was on the bed, not moving, looking quite dead. It was weird that I knew he was dead just by 1 second of looking at him. He was an obese man, and I remember he had giant hands and feet, way out of proportion to his body. Had a strange smell, which I was told later was probably the beginning of decomposition. One of the security guards ran and vomited, and another one said, "Nope, not today," and just walked out. The other 2 security guys called downstairs and started looking around, and I went to help the guard in the bathroom. He eventually left, and I saw maybe 24 small vials on the bathroom counter filled with a cloudy liquid, all insulin. There was a refrigerator which we tossed in the dumpster because he had used it to store food remains and we couldn't clean it, and that made me suggest that he had wanted to unalive himself by overeating, even though the authorities didn't say that was the cause of death until later. A casino manager told me that in the 2 weeks that the guy had been in Vegas, he had run up over $100,000 in credit lines at multiple casinos, and I asked a detective later who I knew to look up the file, and he told me that the guy's wife had divorced him and taken the kids. So I guess the guy went out the way he wanted to. Another guy shot himself in the chest while lying down. Blood everywhere, was disgusting, and the dude that was on the Dave Attell show came to clean up the room, but I didn't get to talk to him. Another guy looked like he had been strangled, and we figured something bad went down. They blamed it on a drug deal because there was residue in the room, I guess. No one heard anything that time. He was also a guy that didn't check out by late checkout. Last guy was compressed to death. A heavy weight had been brought down onto him. He was found alone in his bed, late checkout again. The interesting thing about that guy was that it happened during a BBW, Big Beautiful Women. Think hundreds of women over 400 pounds each, conference at our hotel. So we just assumed he died in some enjoyable fashion. He was also a really tiny guy, like all the BBW fanboys are. The cops questioned a bunch of people but never arrested anyone from that one. We told the group they could never come back after they used the swimming pool as a latrine. Story 41. My first ever job was at a low-budget hotel. For legal reasons, I can't tell you its name, but it rhymes with Bravolage. With it being so cheap, it was frequented by a lot of partygoers from other cities to experience the nightlife. So my 16-year-old self gets ready one Sunday morning and heads into work. Sundays were usually pretty busy for housekeeping because every room would be booked and trashed by drunken idiots. What made Sundays bearable was the amount of funny stuff you find. We once made a sex doll into our receptionist. However, this Sunday was not a fun Sunday. One of the first rooms I walk into had been completely upturned. Things were broken, beer was everywhere, and to top it all off, someone had plugged the bathroom sink and threw up in it until it was practically overflowing. Further up the corridor, one of my colleagues found her own little surprise. While cleaning the room, she found the kettle on the floor of the bathroom. Because it was her job to clean up after people, she picks it up and goes to clean it. Which is when she discovers that someone had crapped in the kettle, and it wasn't just normal excrement, it was green and watery. Now I just stay away from hotel work. Story 42. It didn't happen after a guest stay, it happened during a guest stay. We were getting ready to start renovations and had a contract with a major sports team for an every summer event. Very excited to show off what the new rooms will look like, we put a team representative in the new model room. The alarm bells should have gone off the first night when he called to have his minibar restocked an hour after check-in, then ordered about $150 of room service. That was one $10 chicken wings order and the rest was booze. He declined having his room serviced for 2 days, but constantly calls to have his minibar restocked. Finally, one night he calls at 12:30 at night after our bar is closed, so we're not allowed to restock liquor/sell alcohol, and berates us for an hour about not giving him more. The next morning this is reported, and the manager goes up to talk to the guest. Guest opens the door, and the odor of crap comes from the room. Homeboy drank himself to near death, past the point of crapping himself and not making it to the toilet for 3 days. There's crap everywhere. In the nice model room that we were supposed to be showcasing to the owners of said sports team in a few days. Yeah, we had to explain that one to the dude's boss, and dude had to pay north of $10,000 in damages, but somehow kept his job because he was back the next year for the same event. TLDR, crap. Lots and lots of crap. Crap in the sheets, crap on the walls, so much crap it smelled from the halls. Story 43. I used to work in an accommodation facility as a housekeeper for people who worked on a nearby gas plant. The men would work on a rotation of 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and were not allowed to drink a lot as they were subject to random drug and alcohol tests. So usually, the plant workers would go out the night before they were due to go home and get absolutely wasted. So one day I come to do an arrival room, as someone had departed that day and someone else was due to arrive in the afternoon. I open the door and there's an awful smell. I do a check of the room just to see how big of a job it was. The bed was soaking wet. The guy had wet the bed. I look in the bathroom and oh boy, let me just say I've never seen or smelt anything like it. This guy had been sick everywhere. The shower was blocked with sick. The sink was blocked with sick. The toilet was blocked with, well, toilet paper, but probably sick underneath it all. I was pregnant at the time, and due to strict health and safety procedures on the facility, I was not allowed to go near any bodily fluids, so thank God I didn't have to clean it up. I felt bad for my supervisor, though, who got stuck with the job. Story 44. Once there was a couple in one of our rooms. The woman was pregnant and pretty far along. They had a D&D up for 5 days. Our policy is after 5 days, we have to service the room. On the 5th day, I go to their door and knock and explain I have to come in the room. Guy asks if I could come back later. Certainly. I come back after I finish all the rooms. Knock. Guy asks the same thing, and I explain I don't have to clean, just have to check our PTAC and smoke alarm. He says, hold on. I wait for 10 minutes, and I can hear them moving around like crazy. The maintenance guy comes by and sees me, and I explain what's going on. He knocks. At that moment, the door opens up, and they shove this big, old-fashioned chest out the door and shut it behind them quickly. Now, me and the other guy are stunned and just watch them practically run and drag, not carry, the chest to the elevator. We get in the room. There are no linens, and there's a layer of water on everything. Floor, bed, dressers, everywhere. They left their clothes, they destroyed furniture. We look out the window just to watch them throw the chest into their truck and peel out of the parking lot. Found out later that the truck was stolen, not from hotel. Never figured out what the F that was about. Another time, we had a sex worker. We get a call that she's flashing her chicken around to guests on the second floor, so we go to try to remove her. She opens up the room just barely and refuses to leave, yells profanities and such. We call the police. They get her out of the room and we see the room. Poop, blood, and lube are all over the room. As we see this, the sex worker yells, "I feel so disrespected." And without missing a beat, my GM was like, "My room and my housekeeper's been disrespected," and walks off and starts crying. There was a lot of things stressing her out at the time. It took us 2 weeks to open that room back up. Story 45. During university, I was helping out in the students' representation, and one year, everybody involved, about 20 to 25 people, got together for a weekend of training and planning the next year of activities. Students, being what they are, evenings were interesting. One of the perks of these weekends was the spa in the hotel, always the same place. We paid for extra cleaning up front and got free run of the spa for the weekend. Small hotel, no other guests. In the spa, there was a large whirlpool, maybe 5 by 3 meters, which is where everybody congregated in the evening, most with a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other. That was back in the time when everybody still smoked. One evening, a guy brought a big bottle of bubble bath. Standing in the middle of the pool, bubble bath in one hand, he called the manufacturer helpline to figure out how much of it to use. The call went straight to voicemail, but the guy was not deterred. Put the phone on speaker, and the entire group pitched in to come up with the volume of the whirlpool and amount of bubble bath to use. Eventually, he ended up emptying the entire bottle into the pool, creating a mountain of foam literally reaching to the ceiling. After various couples had made good use of the foamy privacy, everybody made their way back to the rooms eventually, some stragglers barely before breakfast. The owner was not thrilled, but since we had paid cleaning before and were good customers and all other things, he was not too miffed. Years later, an acquaintance working at the multinational enterprise that sold the bubble bath told me about a strange customer service call by a bunch of people apparently having some kind of party and trying to figure out how much bubble bath to use in a giant whirlpool. Apparently, they used the recorded call for training purposes, in sheer hilarity, I guess, for years. Okay, so this is hilarious and actually pretty awesome. If you're going to go the route of quote-unquote trashing hotel property, this is so much better than smearing crap all over the place, vomiting, bleeding everywhere. Like, just, go overboard with the bubble bath. You can have your cake and eat it too. So yeah, this one's good. I like it. Story 46. This is a story from the hotel I worked at that predates my employment by a few years, but I think people might be disturbingly entertained by it. We had a guest die in his sleep due to a brain aneurysm. There was blood on the bedding and mattress due to it, so of course things needed to be thrown away and replaced. However, the owners of this hotel were notoriously cheap. They tried to fight with the staff about whether or not the mattress actually needed to be replaced. They were refusing to get rid of it and instead argued something along the lines of just suck the blood out of it. Not sure if they thought our staff were vampires or what, but no one was willing to keep that mattress except for them. Thankfully, it was finally replaced. My personal stories are pretty dull compared to some of the things I read here, but I will say this. Opt for staying with a friend or family member whenever possible. Those rooms are freaking disgusting. If you do need a hotel room, if it doesn't have a white comforter on the bed, do not stay there. Floral comforters and wild carpet patterns are designed to hide a lot of stains. Story 47. When I was young, my mom took my sister and I to visit some family a day's drive away. It was getting late. Mom is insanely frugal and asked a gas station clerk where the very cheapest motel in the area was. Time before internet. We pull up to this strip motel quite a ways off the highway and Mom gets a room from the front desk. We drive slowly past the rows of doors looking for ours and come to one without a number. It didn't have a number because it was missing the front door. Mom goes back to the front desk. I go in with her to use the bathroom, which had a partial dirt floor and was filled with cicadas. Mom, there's cicadas here too, just like on our tree at home. I remember saying when I came out. She stared at me, clearly questioning her decision to not hightail it out of there, but she was exhausted from driving all day and didn't know the area she was in. Our room doesn't have a door, she tells the desk guy. I remember he was in a wheelchair with 2 different sized wheels, so he was sitting at a slant. Oh, not that again, he says. Really. He gives us another room, and when we get there, the bottom 8 inches or so of the door was missing, like someone had taken a saw and just chopped it clean off. So there was a huge gap underneath. Mom, utterly defeated, frowns and stuffs it with towels and goes to sleep. Sister and I stay up for a bit, snacking on some Cheerios and Kool-Aid we had with us, and then go to sleep as well. I wake up to this scratching sound and see the towels moving under the door. I get kind of scared and shut my eyes, but curiosity gets the best of me, and when I open them, there's an opening. I hear the scratching in the room now, at the end of the bed. I shake my sister awake and keep hearing it, and we work up the courage to turn the light on. For some reason, that made sense to my 6-year-old self. I was convinced it was a leprechaun, and I wanted to see it. Sister flips the light on, and this big, gnarly raccoon is staring at us from the other side of the room, digging through our big baggie of Cheerios. We scream. Mom yells and flips out of bed, but gets her leg tangled in the sheets and falls on the floor. Raccoon flips his crap, gets disoriented, and tries to run, but his claws are sliding on the hardwood and he skids towards the bathroom. Bag of Cheerios goes flying in the air and rains down on us. Mom is screaming and trying to get her leg untangled and bumps the edge of the dresser, which sends the thermos of Kool-Aid flying. Raccoon is screeching like a banshee and is finally bolting towards the door, splattering Kool-Aid like a leaky water balloon and sending soggy Cheerio projectiles against the bed and walls, finally escaping back outside. We slept at a rest stop the rest of the night. So, props and kudos to OP and family for even going in the room in the first place. Like, if the first room that you go to doesn't have a door at all and the second one has like half a door, I'm not going in there, right? Doors are missing for a reason, especially if they look like they're sawed off. So, Raccoon, I think you guys got off lucky with just encountering that and not a serial killer. Story 48. Worked as a front desk agent at a certain very big hotel chain for about 2 years. I have a few good stories under my belt, but this one really takes the effing cake. We had an older couple, mid-50s maybe, come and stay for about a week. They were a very upbeat, polite couple, and we on the staff got to know them a little bit during their stay. On the morning of their checkout, they visited me at the front desk for their folio, dropped off the room keys, and went on their way. About 2 hours go by, and one of our housekeepers walks up to me and hands me a medium-sized, half-zipped-up duffel bag, all the while giggling and chuckling. I glanced inside the open part of the bag and literally went, "Oh, crap." I remember seeing a pretty sizable purple ribbed dildo, handcuffs, and a fake police badge. Looks like someone was into roleplay. Like, good for them, right? Keep the kink going in their old age? Right on. I asked her which room number she found this in, looked it up, and sure enough, it was the couple. I gave them a call, said we could overnight it to them if they wish, but they seemed insistent on turning their car around and picking up their toys, lol. Another hour or so, and in comes the husband, embarrassed AF and apologizing profusely. The toys were recovered, he went on his way, and we all had a good laugh. Story 49. Not me, but a girlfriend of mine and her cousin went to Vegas like 15-ish years ago. All the hotels on the main strip were too expensive, so they opted to stay at a cheaper, no-frills motel just outside the main drag. She said as soon as they got to their room, they noticed it smelled a bit funky, but couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from, so they opened a window and didn't think much about it. Later that night, they went out, partied, drank, yada yada, came back to their room and passed out. The next morning, the smell was still there, but it seemed to have gotten much worse. They opened the window again, but being the middle of June in Las Vegas, it was ridiculously hot. So they stopped by the front desk and asked if someone could check the room and try to figure out where the smell was coming from while they went out for the day. When they got back to the motel a couple hours later, they go to their room and there's 3 or 4 police inside and the doorway is sealed off with yellow crime scene tape. Turns out, the smell they were smelling was that of a dead and decomposing prostitute that someone killed and stuffed under the mattress. It was one of those platform/box bed frames that has planks instead of a box spring, so you just put the mattress on top of the planks. The police estimated that she had probably been there for 2 to 3 days, and because it was so hot, her body started to decompose at an accelerated rate. To this day, my girlfriend says the main thing that bothers her the most about the whole situation is the fact that she slept on top of a dead person. Yeah, that's nightmare fuel. I don't think too many people have sleeping on top of a cadaver on their bucket list. That'd be enough to keep me awake at night for probably 2 weeks after, so geez. Horrible. Obviously the murder, but, sleeping on top of the body that was stuffed under the mattress. Gross. Story 50. Quite late to the party, but here goes. I work nights, and it seems that's when the crazies come into play, and because of this, I now have a personal rule about guests arriving after 1 a.m. without a booking. Anyway, I'd only been at the job for a few weeks and thought every customer is needed as business is business. So 2 guys turn up and want a room. The guy I'm dealing with has powder in his nostril, and I think nothing of it. Well, something, but thought it'd be manageable. They get their key and go to the room, and I think nothing of it. Then 2 ladies appear at the front door in skirts smaller than belts and tops that left nothing to the imagination. I'm about to let them in, door is locked at 11 p.m., when the guys come down. Can you let our girlfriends in? Now we have a 2 adults per room policy. It's stated in the T&Cs and enforced to keep noise down. I tell the guy that he's going to need to pay for another room for the girls, so he does, and I'm flabbergasted that he did. Room rate was about 124 euros. So they disappear upstairs, and I go on a corridor check about 20 minutes later. As per the corridor stinks of weed, and as I get past one door, matey opens it up, and I'm greeted with a cloud of smoke. I tell him that he can't be doing that in the rooms and the police would be called if it persisted. Again, was really new at the job and wasn't aware I had full rights to evict them. So they agree and I try to push it out of my brain and almost exactly on the hour mark, one of the girls comes down and leaves. Then 5 minutes later, one of the guys. Again, think nothing of it, but I'm kind of chuckling to myself. Then the main guy comes down with his girlfriend and asks where his mate is. I genuinely say he must have run out of money because they've both left. The guy sheepishly leaves with his lady friend, and I think no more other than to check and see if the room has been cleared of the smell. Upon entering the first room, I was greeted by the first smell of weed, piss, sex, and beer. The bed was unmade and soaking. I guess he pissed himself. There was powder all over the table, beer cans in the bin, on the floor, and under the bed, and condoms in the toilet. The second room wasn't much better, and I got a strong word off my manager the next day as, it's down to my discretion whether or not I sell a room. So my rule has been enforced ever since. Story 51. I remembered another story that happened where I work. We had a guest stay in one of our suites. Said guest hops in the shower in the morning before his meeting. Immediately after he starts running the water for a shower, he gets covered in a bright pink substance. He grabs a towel to wipe this crap off and then gets covered by a bunch of glitter. He reports this to the duty manager and they reach out to me in housekeeping to ask WTF just happened. I was so effing confused as to how this could possibly happen, as the room attendant that cleaned the room previously is one of my best. I do digging and realize this suite was previously occupied by a bunch of ladies having a bachelorette party. We figured that this was a prank meant for the bride-to-be. The room, being a suite, has 2 bathrooms. The bride-to-be had showered in the parlor side of the suite and avoided being pranked. This gentleman showered in the bedroom bathroom and got a glitter and pink liquid shower. My manager went to speak to him and explain the situation, that we thought this prank was meant for the previous guest. The whole time, she said she could see one single piece of glitter shining on his face, but didn't have the heart to tell him. We had a good laugh that day, and surprisingly, the guests laughed about it as well. Yeah, so again, this falls in the category of harmless in the grand scheme of things. I would much rather get a pink glitter bath than walk into a dead body or a room with crap smeared all over it, or, other bodily fluids. So, just have fun with it. Laugh it off. You're still going to get a good room. It could have been so much worse. Story 52. The hotel I work at has a restaurant and a bar in it. Had 4 guys stay once. They were workers who had been out in the bush for 2 months. They had 2 rooms with 2 in each. When they checked in, they immediately went down to the bar and got hammered. Went upstairs to the restaurant, ordered food and more drinks, disappeared for a while, came back demanding their food. Later in the bar, one of them punches the other, instantly knocking him unconscious. Paramedics and police were called. GWP, guy who punched, runs away after knocking his coworker out. GWP goes to his other 2 coworkers' room. They let him in, and I'm not sure how it happens, but this guy breaks the TV, rips an outlet off a wall, cuts the phone cord to the room cord, pisses in the tub, and then puts bedding and all towels in the tub and pisses on that. The coworkers calm GWP down, but don't tell us anything about what happened in the room, but apologize for the noise. They get him to go back to his own room, and in the meantime, the guy who got punched is up and okay, and the police don't even bother looking for GWP. GWP grabs all his stuff and marches out of the hotel and proceeds to drink in his work van. He makes a few friends in the parking lot. Security tells me to call the police. Again, GWP comes back in with his new friends while I'm on the phone with the police, and GWP instantly bolts. Security then calls to report him for drunk driving. Police come to give his coworkers the keys to the van and let them know he was arrested and that they found the truck uptown. Guy trashed the room on his company card and probably got a DUI. I hope he got fired. Story 53. Late to the races here and also not a worker, but still. Stayed at a Comfort Inn in Durango, Colorado, unknowingly during the peak of hunting season. Place was so crowded and the staff was so overworked. I don't blame them for this one, but my God, it was horrific. 17-year-old me and my dad check in, and I go up to the room while Dad brings the car around. He likes it in view of the room's windows. And I open the door, turn on the lights, and the show began. There were empty beer bottles everywhere, a totally smashed keg with a hunting knife stabbed straight through it, a cooler full of water from melted ice, and fish open in the closet. The 2 beds were shredded and covered in blood, mud, and who knows what else. The TV had been put through the window, but it was grabbed so viciously that the outlet was hanging half out of the wall with bits of drywall still attached. The bathroom had puddles of blood everywhere and a decapitated elk in the shower, gutted squirrels and other forest rodents on the chairs and table, loaded guns, spare ammunition, and knives left. And for some effing reason, a random muddy tire was leaning against the foot of one of the beds, with part of the axle, brakes, and all still attached like the effing Hulk had just ripped it off the truck. This all, by the way, on the 3rd floor. When the staff was notified, we were all completely lost as to why not a soul knew about this. Seems like someone should have heard or seen something, but these guys also apparently just left without checking out, and the place was so busy they hadn't been properly checked in either. Just the key missing from the desk, but the room wasn't listed as occupied. I think these guys got away without paying for a goddamn thing. Needless to say, we found a different hotel. I mean, how big was this hotel room to fit all this stuff in it, and how the heck do you get an elk, a whole entire elk, all the way up to the 3rd floor and into a hotel room bathroom? That is absolutely insane. Story 54. All right, I got 2 here. We have a regular guest who works for the state's Department of Conservation. Comes by a few days a week for a few months when his work brings us out towards us. He's been staying at the hotel for decades. One time, after he left, the housekeeper cleaning the room found a dildo in the bedside table. Now, I know you obviously can't assume certain things about people, but we were all pretty confident he was not the type of person to have used that. Enough so that it was disposed of for sanitary reasons, I believe. Lo and behold, the next time he comes in, I'm the lucky effer at the desk who gets to ask, So, did you happen to leave anything behind last time you were here in the bedside drawer? He, of course, had no idea what I was talking about, and was curious what we'd found. Later on, I admitted, and he thought it was the most hilarious thing. Obviously, a housekeeper missed it right before cleaning his room, but come on, who ever uses a bedside table for a one-night stay? Can't blame him for not catching it the first time. Second one isn't as bad as some of these and doesn't technically count since it was during the guest stay, but it was my first experience with a bad situation. Had a large group from a company staying with us for a week or so, as they set up a new store in the area. One of the employees hadn't shown up for work, and wasn't responding to calls from the boss apparently, who eventually called us directly. After some negotiation, basically the boss wanted us to check, and we pointed out we weren't supposed to. Boss pointed out their company was paying for the room, we admitted fair enough. I was lucky enough to get to head up to this person's room who had missed 2 days of work. I knocked, and there was no answer. The TV was on inside. I could hear. As I opened the door, the heat was distinguishingly high. The lights were all on. The room was trashed like it had been lived in for a month. There was a horrible smell that was BO combined with what I later realized was liquor. I was calling out as I moved into the room, trying my best not to walk in on someone naked. From the door to the bedroom, you can't see the bed by design, just the TV/desk in the room. I had to walk into the room and go around a corner. In the bed was the guest, pale, and I honestly couldn't even tell if she was breathing, but she wasn't responding to my calling out to her. Well, I went to go and get the manager on duty, who's just as unhappy about it as me, since we're now pretty sure we have a corpse on our hands. Turns out, thankfully, she was alive. We called up an ambulance who took her off, against her will, but she wasn't coherent enough to actually refuse. And later learned from her coworkers that, for whatever reason, she had chosen this time to go on a drunken alcoholic bender in the room for days. She did not last with that company very long past that incident. Story 55. Not my experience, but a friend's from uni who was an assistant hotel manager. She called me after this happened because she couldn't wait to tell me when she got home. A guy they've had a history of issues with was staying at the hotel, but he was on his last warning. He'd never had anything this bad happen before, was mostly just general disturbance issues, but he apparently liked to get away from his wife every now and then, and my friend's hotel was the place to go apparently. Anyhow, some random lady comes into hotel looking drugged up and pissed. My friend and her manager are concerned, so they ask lady what's up. Lady says she's fine, she just needs to find room 206. I think was the room number. Friend directs her to the room, but shortly after realizes it's problem dude's room. They just go, ooh, drama. Shortly after that encounter, front desk gets a call from 206 of a lady yelling bloody murder. Friend and manager get up there to find lady and problem dude bloodied up, as well as walls and front door being splattered with blood. Apparently, lady had been clawing at problem dude, but problem dude hit lady's head against the wall, or something rough like that. So it was both of their blood. Ambulance was called and both folks were rushed away, though there were no super dangerous injuries, just a standard procedure. Needless to say, Buddy Boy wasn't ever allowed back in again. My friend and her manager had to clean up the mess since they were short a janitor, and they actually found out that the lady who came to attack the guy apparently was a hooker who'd been with him a few nights back but never got paid. Weird stuff. Everyone was fine in the end though. I remember pics of the room looked like a crime scene though, lol. Story 56. Okay, this mightn't be as bad as most people on here, but here we go. Firstly, I work at one of those 3-star hotel chains in Ireland. In our particular one, there are 2 corridors which are reserved for homeless people living off the council, waiting to be reallocated to another residence. Each room is occupied for 3 to 6 months at a time usually, and whenever a room is made vacant, it has to be deep cleaned. I don't have to clean the regular rooms, but sometimes I'd be thrown into one of these long stay rooms so I can clean them. There are a lot of things I found around which are mildly intriguing, like a fully framed Fireman Sam poster, but there were other horrible things also. On my first long stay room clean, a family of 4 was living in there for almost a year prior, so I come into the room expecting most of their belongings to have gone with them, but I was wrong. The room was littered in children's toys, the walls stained black from months of smoking. Note, we have a non-smoking policy, and there were a week's worth of trays and dishes they'd gotten from breakfast but never decided to return back. After the trays and children's toys were cleaned, which did take over an hour, I was then informed that I'd have to check behind the beds and under the mattresses, and so I did. I won't go into complete details into what I found, but it included several used condoms and other sex-related things. It was absolutely disgusting, but I had to clean it all up. Overall, the room would have had to be repainted and had to get about 2 to 3 hours of a smell lamp dose, as the smell of smoke still remained. I still work at the hotel today, and it's almost been a year since I started. I've never seen anything worse there than this. Story 57. While not a room, when I worked security at a 4-star hotel, we had a homeless person use one of our public bathrooms. Since it was a Sunday night and almost the end of my shift, I said, F it, people deserve to take a crap in comfort. He was in the bathroom for about 5 to 10 minutes before another guest had to use it. The guest walked in and then right out of there and made a beeline for me. He said there was a homeless person in the bathroom, which I knew, who was taking a bath, which I did not know. So I called for backup and headed to the bathroom to tell him to knock it off. Opening the door, the first thing that hit me was the smell. I was expecting the normal sets of smells. That was not the case. When I land eyes on the guy, it was nothing but open sores/wounds and pus. It was unfortunately something out of a horror movie. I told him that he couldn't be washing himself here, which I felt effing terrible about saying. That's when my backup arrived and said, holy crap. That's when I said, well, my shift's almost over, have fun with this, and bounced. From what I was told, the first set of maids refused to clean that bathroom and waited for the night cleaners to come in to steam/power wash and bio the whole bathroom. So this is obviously disgusting, but this is probably like the 4th or 5th story we've read today where the workers just refuse to clean it. Like, can you do that? Is that part of the contract? Like, if something is just overly disgusting, you can just be like, nope, I don't care. Or are these people honestly willing to put their jobs on the line to not clean? Just curious. Story 58. Not a hotel worker, but I did see something weird. This was 2 years ago with my family, and we were on our way to a hotel that we visited every year for 2. It's a 6-hour drive, so it feels like an eternity when we finally reach it. It's a nice hotel that's in front of the sea, and it's very beautiful. On our way there, we saw a couple of weird things. 3 giant trucks in the same small road, and they almost hit another car in front of us. A guy in his car with a 6-year-old in the driver's seat. I think he was trying to teach him how to drive. But what we saw that weirded us out was a car getting out of another hotel that's an hour away from our hotel. And in that car was a guy in a bathroom robe and cream on his face, driving the car looking very angry. And we ignored it, but it was still pretty weird. And when we reached the hotel and spent like 3 days there, I saw the exact same guy in a bathroom robe, but in a different color. And he was beside the pool on his phone. And one of my friends that sometimes meets us in the hotel told me that he saw the guy with only a towel covering his waist, and he was running around the place very creepily. We're going to go to that hotel again in 2 months, and I don't know if I'm going to see that guy again. Hopefully he's not running around without anything on, because that'd be one hell of a story to tell. Story 59. I've held on to this for years. I worked the night audit at a chain, and my boyfriend at the time was a cop. He'd stop by and visit me from time to time, since we had the same schedule, and would also do a check around the building if he had time. We had a security guard, but he was often too busy on his laptop to pay attention to anything. I should also mention we had a guy working at the hotel who was just a F-up in general. He was always coming in super late after my shift, and when he did have to work the audit, he'd mess it up, and I'd have to fix whatever mistakes he'd made. Effing Gordon. Anyway, this one night, I checked this guy into his room. It was a quiet night, and thankfully we still had a lot of rooms left, because the guy came back pale and quite upset. And as I'm trying to talk to him to figure out what's going on, both my boyfriend and the security guard come in to tell me they just saw like 30 people walking out from behind the hotel where this room is located. So then the customer gets it together and tells me that the room is in disarray. The 3 of us put 2 and 2 together, and BF calls a supervisor for backup. The room was a disaster. It smelled heavily of weed and puke, and there was puke everywhere. The customer had approached the door, and the smell hit him before anything. As soon as he opened the door, they scattered and went out the window immediately. The timing of this was incredible, because my BF had just happened to be in the area at the time. These dumb kids had drawn all over the sheets, too. Anyway, we shut off the room, gave the customer another heavily discounted room, and tried to figure out the situation, because the room was listed as vacant. Not 20 minutes after this whole ordeal began, these 2 guys in their early 20s showed up and wanted to know why they couldn't get into their room anymore. They claimed they didn't know the situation or the people involved, but they were high as crap as well. Come to find out, not only was the room listed as vacant, but it was because effing Gordon had rented out the room to these guys who were his friends and pocketed the cash. So we didn't even have a record of them being there. He was fired immediately. Bonus story. We had a separate building with rooms, the annex, and one night another one of our guards walked into the lobby and it smelled heavily like burning tires. I was gagging. It had been raining so hard that a skunk had made its way to the door to seek shelter, and it startled him as he was making the rounds. He got sprayed badly. All 30 rooms in the annex were calling me at 3 a.m. because they needed to be moved, but we had no more rooms that night, and the rain was coming down hard. Other hotels in the area were full as well. Hands down, one of the worst nights I spent working there. Story 60. I didn't work at a hotel, but stayed at a bunch. I used to travel for work. We would be in hotels for 3 nights or more a week, and I did it for several years. The worst off-the-rails moment we ever had was in Tennessee. We were a traveling inventory company, so there was a lot of us. We would have usually somewhere between 20 to 40 plus rooms. Most of the people that worked at this particular company were poor as crap and were young, like mostly early 20s. So they do what you would expect 70 or 80 people in their 20s would do. Party, F, smoke weed, get drunk. Well, the drug supplier for the crew didn't get any weed before we went out that week, so they were getting drunk instead, which led to a bunch of rooms getting trashed. Some brothers that were staying in the same room decided to have their own version of WrestleMania in their room. Another tried to barbecue in a sink. Weed guy got some weed for the last night we were there and brought it up. I worked a different shift than pretty much everyone else. I set everything up the day before and they came in the next day. They had all checked out and left me in the room because I didn't get back until 2 or 3 a.m. I hear a knock on the door and I ignore it. Pro tip, they never give you enough time to answer the door. Housekeeping, count to 3, and they're opening the door. If you don't yell out, they will be in there and usually catch you halfway to your clothes. Even if you do, they rarely hear you and come in anyways. They open the door and are surprised to see me. Can I talk to you? Sure, let me get dressed. I go to the door and it isn't housekeeping. It's the hotel manager and 2 police. Can we come in? Should have said no, but I knew me and my roommate didn't have anything in there, so I let them. They were like, well, it looks like you just slept here. Well, yeah, what else would I be doing? Well, the hotel is destroyed. What? There's a bunch of damage to the rooms, and which one of your buddies is dealing? I had just transferred up to this crew within a month. I went straight to denial. I don't know any of these people. I work a different shift. I barely see anyone. Well, we found half a pound of marijuana under a pillow. I don't know anything about that. We're your coworkers. I gave them the address of the store and the phone number for the manager of the crew. They left. I got my stuff in GTFO. When I got to the store, I asked what was up. One of the admins told me the damage bill was up to $30K. Managers were running around like crazy. I went out to one of our work vans with the guy I work with, also roommate, to explain what was going on. While we were out there, police are walking around to our vans and writing down plate numbers. We went to the van drivers and told them, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I don't know your people, but if any of them might have something they don't want found, they better get rid of it. They searched most of the vans. The guy that had left the weed behind had a portable safe. They found it, more weed, cocaine, and a gun. He had been standing around watching them search the van when someone told him he better bounce. We eventually saw him a couple years later, and he did get caught, but not much time. Story 61. Hotel maintenance worker. I had posted about it before, but I found a guest who had died overnight. Natural causes, thankfully not self-unaliving. That was pretty terrible. But on the funnier side of things, I was getting ready to do shift change one day, Christmas Eve actually, and got a call to go unlock a room that had the safety latch thrown. There wasn't supposed to be anyone in the room and no one was answering. So I go get my tool, pop the latch, and get ready to go in with the assistant manager on duty. The worst smell imaginable. Like, take week-old ball sweat, rotten private parts, crap and filth, use it to marinate your shoes before wearing them for a trek through Cambodia. As soon as the door was open, it was in the hall. We walk in, cautiously announcing ourselves, and the assistant MOD turns and gags when he rounds the corner. On the bed, there's a man, lying face down in the pillows, on top of the covers, wearing nothing but a Santa hat, and he's completely unaware of us, higher than a kite, and after about 10 seconds starts effing a pillow while we stand there trying to get his attention. As he's doing this, he's continually ripping ass into the air, and I mean like ass clap type farts. We end up just noping out of the room and called the police. They show up, and turns out dude was homeless and so high he couldn't barely speak or walk, and just found the room latched open while housekeeping was checking rooms. They arrest him and haul him out on a stretcher. Pretty sure they tossed those sheets. Story 62. I once left a hotel bathroom looking like a murder scene. I was assaulted walking home and had my nose broken by a sucker punch. My nose instantly began hemorrhaging blood. Once the altercation was over, I went to the closest place I could to try and stop the bleeding and clean myself up a little. This happened to be a hotel. I got into reception and the night guy just pointed to the closest toilet just off the reception, which was the ladies' toilet. I ran in and began trying to clean myself up. Everything I touched and everywhere I went in that toilet got covered in blood. It was a real mess. The worst bit was I sneezed. Probably some reaction to all the blood in my nose, but it went all over the mirror by the sinks. The splatter was at least 1 meter by 1 meter, maybe even bigger. I tried to clean it up, but it all just smeared everywhere. So once the bleeding was under control, I just walked out and said to the guy on reception, "I'm really sorry, but it's like a murder scene in there." He sort of awkwardly smiled and nodded, but to this day, I wonder what his reaction was when he saw it and who in the end cleaned it up. I really can't explain well enough just how bad it was. My entire front side was saturated with blood. I had to throw my clothes away, and my nose still bled for 24 hours before it finally stopped completely. Story 63. Oh, I can chip in. Me and my girlfriend worked in a hotel in NZ for a few months when traveling that catered for about 90% Korean tourists. They were usually really clean, except that they had obviously collectively never seen a kettle before, so we used to find all sorts of stuff like chicken, noodles, etc. being cooked inside a kettle, all burned to crap on the element. One left a used tampon in a face cloth and rolled it up exactly like it was when she found it. Good job my girlfriend checked. It would have been pretty forgivable to just look and assume that it hadn't been used. The remaining 9% were Indian tourists, one group of which were so badly behaved that the bus driver refused to pick them up again, so they were stranded in the hotel for a few more days. Massive families in overcrowded rooms, kids mashing curry into the carpet, generally being rude as hell to all the staff, etc. Rooms were trashed, took about 4 times longer to clean than any other rooms. But the best one was on our first day. A young, disgruntled, white, English language native, ex-employee and his girlfriend had been staying in a room and left promptly. My girlfriend got sent to clean up the room and found an ungodly mess. Crap, yes, literal crap, smeared all into the carpet and bedding. Room totally trashed, you get it. I don't know what drives people to do something like that, knowing full well that it's not management or anyone like that who's going to have to clean it up. Utter idiots. It was a great job though. Great staff, great location, etc. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Story 64. This one is pretty tame compared to a lot of the stories here. I had to clean a small room one day, which we already knew had been occupied by an older guest. She'd been a pain in everyone's asses for her entire stay. First, I didn't find this out until later, our GM was letting her stay for free quite frequently, as she had to travel to our town for medical stuff. She would bring boxes of old junk with her and would try to get us to store it for her. During her first visit, she kept trying to drag staff into doing everything for her, from unloading her car to helping her drag boxes of junk and weird appetizers to our breakfast room for a birthday party. After her third visit, and a box that remained in our small housekeeping office for weeks, someone finally told her we weren't a storage unit. So this last time, after she left, my housekeeping manager, who stripped the room, warned me before I got up there. We're by the beach, you see, and we have this grass here that produces huge seed tufts. They look really cool. We even had a bouquet of them in a nice arrangement in the front office for a while. Hoarder lady liked this stuff too, so much that she dragged a handful of grass stalks all the way from the beach, and then stuffed them into her tiny room, leaving them there after she checked out. I first had to stuff them into a large garbage bag, and then spent 30 minutes just vacuuming that stuff up. It clings, just not to the carpet, but to the covers on the lamps. Surfaces were sticky that shouldn't have been. To add insult to injury, she stole the coffee basket out of the room. It's a small wicker basket, not a terribly fancy or expensive item. Just why? Why the coffee basket? Ugh, that was an infuriating room. Story 65. I don't work for a hotel, but you bet I can tell you that the room I once left with my friend was probably nightmare-inducing for the poor bastard who went in to tidy it. I was invited to a wedding and decided to bring my best friend of 12 years along with me. I've got lady plumbing. He has male plumbing, though he often identifies himself as some form of helicopter or another. Anyway, we make the drive up and stop off for lunch before checking into our hotel room, feasting on all the culinary delights West Yorkshire has to offer. After checking in, we decide to have a few pints and play some Stellaris, and can't be bothered to eat out again as it's cheaper to grab a couple of pot noodles and just eat those. A few hours before bed, we chow down and dispose of our guilty not poodles in the rubbish receptacle provided. Now, something about my friend. He has an absolutely appalling diet when left to his own devices, and according to him, has some undescribed tummy thing that gives him the most rancid farts known to man. They're bad enough that I've started to suggest that he has arse cancer. Anyway, we eat Yorkshire food and pot noodles, and drink enough to make the average Yorkshire man raise an eyebrow appreciatively, bumping into the groom at the bar and getting him hammered too. We go back to the room and go to sleep, my friend tooting and pooting his way through the whole thing. We wake up in the morning and the first thing I notice is that my nostril hair is missing. Nothing unusual there. We go for breakfast and have a ciggy, leaving the bed unmade as we'd be getting back into it again at some point in the future. After our brekkie and nicotine absorption, we head back to the room to get ready for the wedding. Oh dear God. You know when you're so used to the way your home smells, you only notice it when you've been away for a while? Yeah, the room now noticeably smelled of a combination of pot noodle and farts. Not the good kind of farts either, where you can almost discern what you've eaten for dinner earlier on. The bad kind of farts. The kind of farts that smell painful, like they were painful coming out. Like they took their time about it too. The ones that hang about in one spot, like Slimer from Ghostbusters, that are almost corporeal in their stench. Crap. We had to get ready, so, hoping my dress hadn't disintegrated, I opened the window, hoping that would dispel the smell. We got ready and went to the wedding. It was fan-bloody-tastic, and made even better that the reception was at the hotel we were staying at. I have to go and change my shoes because I can't damn walk, so I go back to the room. The smell was still there, the window was still open, and the bed was made. Story 66. I used to work at an expensive bed and breakfast as a housekeeper. We have white towels, linens, and bathrobes in our little hotel. One day, we went to clean a room and immediately realized it was a code red. Blood. So much blood. And if we hadn't seen the couple check out that morning, we would have called the cops. Apparently, the guy was in from New York and didn't care the woman he was with was on her period. It was on the carpet, in the grout in the bathroom tile, soaked through 2 extra large white bath towels, 2 regular bath towels, all the washcloths, the duvet was ruined. We had to soak everything in industrial strength hydrogen peroxide and some of it still didn't come clean. The worst though was the code brown. Somebody left the styrofoam container from a store-bought package of shrimp on the carpet, and there was crap sprayed on the headboard. We assumed they slept in another hotel. The stench was the most organ-churning, acrid ass spray I've ever encountered. As my manager and I start cleaning opposite sides of the large wood headboard with a strong industrial cleaner, all windows open and fans going, my other coworker just points up and we look to see flecks of crap stuck up on the ceiling. I told her those are her crap nuggets for cleaning, finders keepers. People are gross, and I've received the appropriate amount of therapy I needed to get over some of the crap I saw. Story 67. Used to work as a bellman back in the day. The things I saw. Sheesh. Had one guy phone down to the front desk saying he was having a heart attack early one morning. The medical team came and left pretty quickly with him. The medical team were the only ones who entered his room, and left the Do Not Disturb sign on after they left. In the evening, we got a call from the guest who relinquished his phone to be delivered to his hospital room. I was tasked to retrieve it and got it delivered. I knocked on the door and addressed myself like any usual task. No answer. I unlocked and opened the door, and like a deer in headlights, in all directions, 3 walking, laying, and sleeping naked she-males. Apparently, after assessing the situation and them getting dressed quickly, they explained that the guy hired escorts and took boner pills, which led to his heart attack. After delivering his phone to his room in the hospital, $200 tip by the way, I explained to the gentleman as to what I saw, and then he tasked me to get them removed, and he would provide an additional tip when he got back. Had one of the front desk attendants assist me as a witness. As soon as we got up to the room, we did the usual thing. Called first, then knocked and addressed ourselves. Got a reply from what sounded like an older gentleman saying to leave him alone. kept being persistent that he needed to open the door. Finally, he opened the door. And sure enough, the she-male escorts were there with this gentleman. Turned out, they started to do in-house escorting in a room that wasn't theirs. After we were able to get them to leave, we consulted with other employees at the hotel, one of them being the bar staff, and they stated they saw those women at the bar literally picking up men almost every hour. When the actual guest of the room returned, I explained the situation to him, managed to upgrade his room to a suite, and moved all his belongings for him. The guest was very thankful. The following morning, he had checked out early and left me a tip in an envelope. $1,000. Twice by the same person on different occasions. I was asked by a gentleman to retrieve his suitcase from his room. Of course, as usual, I obliged. As soon as I walked in, it was an awful smell of poo and all his clothes laying on the floor out of his suitcase. I immediately turned around and went back to him, told him all of his belongings weren't in the suitcase, and unless he wanted me to bring him an empty suitcase, he needed to pack all his things up himself. He reported me to the general manager, who sided with me, thank God. The second occurrence, the exact same scenario. Smell of poo and clothes laying all over the room. Only this time, there was what looked like an adult poo-filled diaper on top of his suitcase. Immediately turned to my general manager, who times 86'd him for life. Apparently, there was another hotel downtown who times 86'd him for the same thing. Man, too many weird stories. Story 68. My ex and I were staying in a room at the beach. We were there for a week and a half. The first night, we brought a bushel of steamed crabs. It was on sale for $60. I thought that was cheap, so I figured it wasn't that many crabs. Never really bought crabs before. Well, I was wrong. They came out with this box about 2 feet deep and wide, filled to the brim with seasoned steamed crabs. We had a bunch of beer at the hotel room, so we decided to take them back there. Well, we got super drunk and maybe ate not even a quarter of the bushel. Couldn't let them go bad. Luckily, we had a mini fridge. They weren't going to fit in there in the box, so I took Walmart bags and filled them with crabs and stuffed them into the fridge. Almost all of them fit. We had a cooler, the one with beer. I had to take the beer out, add ice, and put the rest of the crabs in. Okay, all good. She went to sleep. I continued to drink and eat ice cooler crabs. I made a pretty decent mess. Shell, meat, and Old Bay made it about a foot diameter around where I sat. Passed out. The next day I woke up and was in shock at all the mess and smell. The room stunk so bad. The crabs in the fridge leaked out onto the carpet. Huge red stinky stain. We cleaned up as much as we could, but we couldn't do much. Not only that, but we were embarrassed to let housekeeping clean up. So for a week and a half, the juices and smell marinated the room, plus all the trash of a normal week and a half. I kept getting trash bags, so everything made it into bags like beer cans and just normal trash. We ate crabs every night the whole time and never finished them. Ended up tossing what was left on our final day. I felt so bad for housekeeping, so we left a decent tip. Luckily, they never charged my card or anything. Story 69. I used to work at a resort, but the worst I found was when I was actually a guest staying at a Travelodge in Jackson, Tennessee. We were on the road all day, cross-country road trip. It was super late and we were tired, so we stopped at the next town and got a cheap room for the night. It was maybe midnight and we planned on hitting the road by 7. Well, we get into the room and holy crap. We started by taking a shower. Not only were the shower curtains ripped, so all the water escaped onto the bathroom floor, but since I'm 6'2", I was able to see the top rim/ledge of the shower stall. What do my eyes see? 2 effing extinguished cigarette butts. We get out of the shower and I pull back the sheets and I found probably a half gram of ground up weed. I assume from when the last folks there rolled a joint or some crap and the housekeepers didn't change the sheets. There was also a nice gap between the bottom of the hotel door and the threshold, so we woke up to find a cockroach in the room as well. We emptied all of our belongings that we brought into the room and made sure no roaches were joining us on the trip before we left. Needless to say, we definitely should have gone elsewhere, but we were so tired and running out of hotel options till Memphis, so yeah, we slept on top of the covers, fully clothed. I mean, look, if it gets this bad, recline the seat in your car all the way and just sleep in your frickin' car. My God, that is dreadful. Or just keep driving, closer to your destination. Because you can argue that you're tired and need some sleep, but let's be honest, in a room that disgusting, you're not getting any sleep anyway, so just keep driving. Story 70. Worked at housekeeping as my first job in high school. High-end condo-style rentals. Prom weekend, and clearly someone's parents footed the bill for a large group of high school kids stay in this condo. We walked in and there was what you would expect. Beer bottles everywhere. Clearly, some drug usage and cigarette burns in the furniture. Nothing we haven't seen before, just 1,000 times worse. Then we get to the back room, which faces either the water or the gold course. This room has a one-person jacuzzi. 2 people if you're feeling romantic. These kids had filled the jacuzzi with dirt and had gone out and pulled up plants from the grounds and replanted them in the tub. To make matters worse, once we dug all the plants and dirt out, we had to run the jets for the bath. They had stuffed paper and trash in the jets, which shot everywhere when we started it up. Needless to say, security deposit was not returned, and they were charged the max cleaning fee we could charge. Story 71. One evening years ago, while working at a desk clerk for a new but small Midwestern motel, I had to call an ambulance after receiving word of a guest being violently sick in their room. After the ambulance arrived and wheeled the guest away, I went to the room to inspect, but it was blocked from entering by one of the paramedics who was just about to leave. He advised me to call housekeeping immediately. Unfortunately, this was the evening shift, and I was the only employee in the hotel. Cleaning staff wouldn't arrive for hours. Again, I attempted to enter the room and again was stopped by the paramedic. You don't want to go in there. The look on his face was enough. I went back to my station at the front desk and called the general manager to inform her of what happened. She said she'd make a few calls, and that was pretty much it for me. Later, the only thing I ever learned about the condition of the room was that the walls had to be repainted and the bed and much of the carpeting was replaced. I can only imagine what was so bad that a paramedic appeared traumatized. Story 72. Not worst. Most would say best. I work at a condominium property with individually owned condos. I was asked by one of the owners to tidy up their room for a realtor showing while their son was in-house. The son was out of the room and there was an inquiry for a last-minute showing. The owner, who I have a good relationship with, told me that I needed to go hide some stuff, and after a few choice words about his son, he informed me that his son had weed in a mason jar by the fireplace, and that he needed me to go hide it. So I go into the room and sure enough, there's an ounce of weed in a mason jar. I hid it in the dresser drawer, along with any paraphernalia, and went back to my desk to call the owner and tell him where I left it. After the son departs, a housekeeper walked into my office with something wrapped in a towel, and the son had left the ounce of weed. We held it for his next arrival and gave it to him when he returned. For clarification, I live in a state where marijuana is legal and recreational users can possess up to an ounce.